Behind a decorative palm tree at her own sister's wedding, Lena Parker sat alone at a folding table, the only guest hidden from view. One arm absent since birth, 22 years of silent cruelty had led to this moment, segregated, invisible, treated like a stain on her family's perfect image. The champagne flowed, the laughter echoed, and hundreds of guests pretended not to notice the young woman exiled to the shadows. But across that glittering ballroom, one widowed father saw what everyone else refused to acknowledge. And 6 simple words, "Act like you're with me," would shatter everything. Before we begin Lena's journey from isolation to belonging, please take a moment to comment below with your city or country so I can see how far this story travels. And if this story moves you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these narratives of courage and second chances. The Ashford estate had never looked more beautiful, and Lena Parker had never felt more invisible. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the grand ballroom, transforming the space into something from a fairy tale. White roses cascaded from every surface, climbing up marble columns, draping across the head table, floating in crystal bowls that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The air itself seemed to shimmer with wealth and carefully curated elegance. Lena stood just inside the service entrance, her good hand clutching a small clutch purse against her hip, her empty left sleeve pinned carefully beneath the fabric of her dress. The burgundy bridesmaid gown had been chosen by her sister Vanessa, a color that wouldn't draw attention, as her mother had explained with that particular smile that never quite reached her eyes. The dress fit poorly, altered hastily by a seamstress who'd been given very little notice and even less guidance about how to accommodate Lena's missing arm. "You're late." Her mother, Patricia Parker, materialized from the crowd like a predator sensing wounded prey. She was resplendent in champagne-colored silk, her blonde hair swept into an elaborate updo that had probably taken 3 hours and cost more than Lena's entire college tuition for the semester. "The photos are already done, thank goodness. We couldn't wait any longer." "I texted that I was running late," Lena said quietly. "My bus." "Your bus." Patricia's lips thinned. "Yes. Well." She glanced around the ballroom, her expression calculating. "We've seated you over there." She gestured vaguely toward the far wall. "Behind the plants. We thought you'd prefer something more private." Lena followed her mother's gesture and felt something cold settle in her chest. Tucked behind an enormous decorative palm and a floor-to-ceiling floral arrangement sat a single folding table, the cheap plastic kind used for outdoor picnics, not elegant wedding receptions. A single folding chair. A single place setting that didn't match the expensive china glittering on every other table in the room. "I'm sitting alone?" The words came out smaller than Lena had intended. "Well, we couldn't very well seat you with the other bridesmaids." Patricia's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Vanessa has been planning this day for 2 years. The photos need to be perfect. The seating arrangements need to be perfect. Everything needs to be perfect. Surely you can understand that." What Lena understood, with the clarity that comes from 22 years of carefully administered rejection, was that she would never be perfect enough. Not for this family. Not with one arm missing and a face that didn't photograph well according to Vanessa's expensive wedding planner. Not when her very existence seemed to be a reminder of something imperfect in the Parker family's otherwise flawless presentation. "There are over 300 guests here," Patricia continued, already turning away. "No one will notice. Just stay put. Eat your dinner. Try to look happy. This is your sister's special day." She vanished into the crowd before Lena could respond, swallowed up by the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Lena stood frozen for a moment, watching the woman who'd given birth to her treat her like a problem to be managed, rather than a daughter to be celebrated. The loss of her arm had been congenital. She'd been born this way. But sometimes Lena wondered if what she was really missing wasn't a limb at all. It was the part of her parents that should have loved her unconditionally. That part seemed to have never developed either. She made her way across the ballroom, weaving between tables where people laughed and clinked glasses and didn't meet her eyes. Behind the decorative palm, her exile felt even more pronounced. From her folding chair, she could see thin slices of the celebration through the fronds, glimpses of her sister's radiant smile, her father's proud expression, her mother's perfectly maintained composure. None of them looked her way. A server appeared, young and uncomfortable, clearly instructed to bring her meal separately from the others. "Here's your dinner, miss," he mumbled, setting down a plate without ceremony. The food was the same as what everyone else received: seared salmon, roasted vegetables, some kind of grain pilaf. But somehow it tasted like ashes in her mouth. Lena picked at the meal mechanically, listening to the sounds of joy and celebration that felt like they were happening in another world entirely. This wasn't the first time she'd been made to feel like an outsider in her own family. That distinction belonged to countless childhood moments: birthday parties where her gifts were noticeably cheaper than Vanessa's, family photos where she was positioned at the edge of the frame, school events her parents forgot to attend while never missing a single one of Vanessa's performances. But this felt different. This felt like a culmination, a final public declaration that she would never truly belong. "Did you see where they put her?" The voice drifted over from somewhere nearby, close enough that Lena could hear clearly, too far away for her to see who was speaking. "Behind the plants?" Another voice, female and laden with gossip. "I heard Patricia didn't want her in any of the candid shots. That's awful. That's Patricia Parker. Everything has to be perfect. And Lena, well, she doesn't exactly fit the aesthetic, does she?" Lena set down her fork carefully, precisely, as if the small act of control could somehow keep her from shattering. 22 years. 22 years of this, and it still had the power to hurt. Perhaps that was the cruelest part. Not that her family treated her this way, but that some small, hopeful part of her kept expecting things to change. The speeches began. Her father stood at the microphone, tall and distinguished in his expensive tuxedo, and waxed eloquent about his beautiful daughters and how proud he was of this day. Lena waited for him to acknowledge her, even with a glance. He never did. His eyes swept the room and seemed to skip right over the corner where she sat hidden. When her mother spoke, her voice trembled with carefully practiced emotion. "My baby girl," she said, dabbing at tears that might have been real. "Vanessa has always been everything we could have hoped for in a daughter. Beautiful, accomplished, perfect in every way." The words landed like stones. Everything we could have hoped for. The implication hung in the air, and everything we got with the other one was a disappointment. Vanessa's speech was worse because it was entirely focused on herself, her new husband, and their perfect future together. She thanked everyone who'd made the day special: the wedding planner, the caterer, her best friends who'd stood beside her as bridesmaids, even the florist who'd created the stunning arrangements. She thanked her parents profusely for their unconditional love and support. She never mentioned Lena. Not once. When the speeches ended and the dancing began, Lena sat in her folding chair behind her wall of plants and wondered if anyone would notice if she simply left. Probably not. She could slip out through the service entrance, catch a bus back to her tiny apartment, and avoid the humiliation of sitting alone while everyone else celebrated. She was gathering her courage to do exactly that when she became aware of someone watching her. The sensation was peculiar. After hours of being deliberately ignored, having someone's attention felt almost physical. Lena glanced up through the palm fronds and found herself meeting the gaze of a man seated several tables away. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair that was slightly too long and hadn't been styled for the occasion. His tuxedo fit well but looked uncomfortable on him, like he wasn't used to formal wear. There was something in his expression that Lena couldn't quite name: concern, perhaps, or recognition of a different kind. The look of someone who understood what it meant to be out of place. Their eyes met for only a moment before Lena looked away, heat rising in her cheeks. She didn't need pity. That was almost worse than the deliberate cruelty, the well-meaning sympathy of strangers who saw her as a problem to be solved rather than a person to be known. But when she glanced back, he was still watching, and beside him, a little girl in a purple dress was tugging on his sleeve and whispering something urgent. The man listened, nodded, then looked back at Lena with an expression that had shifted into something more resolute. He stood up. Lena watched with growing alarm as he began making his way across the ballroom, the little girl still clutching his hand. He was coming toward her. Why was he coming toward her? Had her mother sent him to tell her to leave? Was he one of the event coordinators about to explain that her table was needed for something else? She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, to to become as invisible on the outside as she'd always been made to feel on the inside. The man reached her table and stopped. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, with gray eyes that held an unexpected warmth. The little girl peered around his leg, her own eyes, the same gray as her father's, filled with something that looked like indignation on Lena's behalf. "Hi," the man said. His voice was gentle but firm, like someone used to handling delicate situations. "I'm Ethan Miller. This is my daughter, Sophie." Lena stared at him, confused and uncertain. "Hello?" "I'm here with the Ashford group," he continued, gesturing vaguely toward the groom's side of the room. "Work obligation. Robert and I are colleagues." He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. "I've been watching for the last hour, and I need to say something. What's happening here? You sitting alone, hidden away like you're supposed to be ashamed. It's wrong, it's cruel, and I can't sit over there and pretend I don't see it." Lena felt her throat tighten. "You don't need to." "My daughter noticed you first," Ethan interrupted gently. "She's 7, and she has a better sense of right and wrong than most adults in this room. She asked me why that lady is sitting by herself, why she looks sad, why no one is talking to her." He crouched down slightly, bringing himself closer to Lena's eye level. "I didn't have a good answer, so I'm here to fix it." "Daddy said hiding people is mean," Sophie added, her small voice carrying surprising conviction. "Like when Emma B. tried to hide Emma R. during group projects because she thinks she's weird. Teacher said that's bullying." From the mouths of children. Lena felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been holding back years of suppressed pain and anger and grief. "I appreciate the sentiment," she managed, her voice rough. "But you don't want to make a scene. My family, your family should be ashamed of themselves." Ethan's voice was quiet but intense. "I lost my wife 3 years ago, cancer. Before she died, she made me promise something. She said that if I ever saw someone being treated unjustly, especially someone vulnerable, I should stand up. That silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit." He straightened, his expression softening. "I can't make your family treat you better, but I can refuse to be one more person in this room who looks the other way." Lena stared at him, this stranger who had somehow seen her when her own parents couldn't, or wouldn't. "What are you suggesting?" "Come sit with us," Ethan said simply. "I've got an empty seat at my table. Sophie would love the company, and if anyone asks—" He paused, something fierce entering his expression. "Act like you're with me. Let them think you're part of my group. You shouldn't have to sit here alone." 6 words. 6 simple words that somehow contained more kindness than Lena had received from her family in 22 years. "Act like you're with me." Lena's voice failed her. She wanted to say yes, wanted to stand up and walk away from this folding table and this decorative palm and this entire humiliating situation. But 22 years of conditioning held her paralyzed. Your mother will do what, exactly?" There was steel beneath Ethan's gentle tone now. "Tell you to go back to hiding? Explain to the 300 guests why you're not allowed to sit with the other guests?" He held out his hand. "You have a choice right now. You can stay here and let them keep treating you like you're less than human, or you can stand up and claim your dignity." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "You should sit with us. We have chocolate cake coming for dessert. I'm not supposed to have 2 pieces, but Daddy said special occasions are okay, and this is special because we're making a new friend." The childish logic was somehow more compelling than any adult argument. Lena looked down at Ethan's outstretched hand, steady and sure, offering something she'd been denied her entire life. A choice. She reached out with her good hand and took it. Ethan's grip was firm and warm, and when he helped her stand, he did it without any of the patronizing carefulness people usually employed. He treated her like a person who'd simply been sitting and was now standing, nothing more complicated than that. "Get your purse," he said. "Leave the rest." Lena grabbed her small clutch, and together, Ethan on one side, Sophie on the other, they began walking across the ballroom. It was perhaps 30 feet from her hidden table to Ethan's assigned seat. It might as well have been 30 miles. Lena felt every eye in the room tracking their progress, felt the ripple of whispers spreading like wildfire through the crowd. She kept her head up, even as her heart hammered against her ribs, even as panic threatened to choke her. Ethan's hand remained steady on her elbow, not gripping, not steering, just present, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. They'd made it perhaps halfway across the floor when Patricia materialized in their path, her face pale with fury beneath her careful makeup. "Lena," her mother's voice was low and dangerous. "What are you doing?" "She's joining us at our table," Ethan said before Lena could respond. His tone was pleasant, professional, utterly unbothered. "I'm Ethan Miller, with Ashford Group. This is my daughter Sophie. We noticed your daughter was seated alone and thought she might prefer some company." Patricia's eyes darted between them, calculating rapidly. Around them, guests were openly watching now, their conversations dying away as they sensed drama unfolding. "That's very kind," Patricia said through a smile that looked like it caused her physical pain. "But Lena prefers a quieter setting. The noise bothers her. We were just trying to be considerate." "Does the noise bother you?" Ethan asked Lena directly, his gray eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. Lena thought about lying, thought about smoothing things over, avoiding confrontation, being the good daughter who never made waves. 22 years of conditioning screamed at her to nod, to apologize, to slink back behind the palm tree where she belonged. Instead, she found herself saying, "No, it doesn't bother me at all." The words hung in the air between them, a direct contradiction of her mother's lie, spoken in front of dozens of witnesses. Patricia's expression flickered, her composure cracking just slightly. "Lena, don't be difficult." "I'm not being difficult," Lena said, and was shocked by how steady her own voice sounded. "I'm accepting an invitation from a kind stranger, that's all." "Your sister hasn't spoken to me all evening," Lena finished. "I'm sure she won't even notice." It was perhaps the most openly defiant thing Lena had ever said to her mother, and the shock of it registered on Patricia's face. For a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Then her expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "We'll discuss this later," she said quietly. "At home." "Actually," Ethan interjected smoothly, "I was hoping to speak with you and your husband before the evening ends. About your seating arrangements. I'm sure it was an oversight having Lena tucked away like that. Perhaps we could discuss more appropriate accommodations for family members at future events." His tone was professional, almost friendly, but there was something unmistakably pointed beneath it. The implication was clear. "I see what you're doing, and I'm willing to make it public." Patricia's jaw tightened, but they were surrounded by guests now, all watching with undisguised interest. Making a scene would be worse than letting Lena go. She could see her mother making that calculation in real time. "Of course," Patricia said finally, her voice tight. "We can discuss it later. Enjoy your dinner." She swept away, her champagne silk gown swirling dramatically. Lena watched her go and felt something shift inside her chest, fear loosening its grip, replaced by something that felt dangerously like hope. "Come on," Ethan said gently. "Tables this way." They continued across the ballroom, and this time no one stopped them. Ethan's table was positioned in a decent location, not the premium spots near the head table where the Parker family sat, but not relegated to the far walls either. There were 8 seats total, currently occupied by 3 other couples who looked up with obvious curiosity as they approached. "Everyone, this is Lena Parker," Ethan said easily, pulling out a chair for her. "Bride's sister. She's joining us for dinner." "Oh, how lovely." One of the women, mid-40s, kind-faced, wearing a royal blue gown, immediately brightened. "I'm Carol Davidson. This is my husband, James. We work with Robert as well. It's so nice to have another woman at the table. These work events can get awfully stuffy." The introductions continued around the table. Everyone was friendly, welcoming, treating her like a normal guest rather than a curiosity or a problem. Lena found herself relaxing incrementally, the tight knot of anxiety in her chest beginning to loosen. Sophie climbed into the seat beside Lena and immediately launched into an enthusiastic explanation of her purple dress and how it had exactly 7 layers and how her daddy had let her pick it out herself even though it was probably too fancy. "It's beautiful," Lena told her honestly. "Purple is an excellent choice. It suits you." "You think so?" Sophie beamed. "Emma B. said it was too bright. But Emma B. says mean things about everybody, so I don't listen to her." "Do you like your dress?"
The question was innocent, without any of the loaded implications Lena was used to. It's okay, she said carefully. Just okay? Sophie frowned. That's sad. Dresses should be better than okay. Dresses should make you feel pretty. Sophie, Ethan said gently, remember what we talked about? Sometimes people can't choose their own clothes for events. That doesn't mean they don't look nice. Oh. Sophie absorbed this information seriously. Did someone else pick your dress? My sister did, Lena admitted. The bride? Sophie's eyes went wide. She picked it, but it's not even purple. If I was getting married, I would make all the other ladies wear purple so we could match and look like we were in a purple army. Despite everything, despite the humiliation and the pain and the fear still thrumming through her veins, Lena found herself laughing. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but genuine. A purple army does sound quite impressive, she agreed. Dinner was served to their table, and Lena discovered that food tasted entirely different when you weren't eating it alone behind a potted plant. The conversation flowed around her. Work gossip, stories about children, plans for upcoming holidays. Carol drew her in, asking gentle questions about her studies. She was in her senior year at community college, majoring in child development. Her interests? She volunteered at a youth center. Her plans after graduation? She didn't know yet, couldn't afford to think that far ahead. No one asked about her arm. No one stared at the pinned sleeve or offered pitying smiles, or suggested she must be so brave for existing in public. They just talked to her, like she was a person. It was perhaps the most radical act of kindness Lena had ever experienced. Your daughter is wonderful, she told Ethan quietly during a lull in the conversation. Sophie had gotten up to visit another child at a nearby table, leaving them with a moment of relative privacy. She is, Ethan agreed, his expression softening as he watched his daughter across the room. She's been my anchor since her mother died. Kids have this incredible way of cutting through all the nonsense adults create. She sees things clearly, right and wrong, fair and unfair. No gray area. He turned back to Lena. She was the one who insisted I do something, said it wasn't right that you were all alone. You didn't have to listen to her. Yes, I did. Ethan's voice was firm. My wife, Sarah, she was a social worker. Spent her whole career fighting for kids who nobody else was fighting for. The ones in broken systems, bad situations, families that didn't want them or couldn't care for them properly. She saw people that everyone else overlooked. He paused, his jaw tightening slightly. Before she died, she made me promise to keep seeing them too. To not become the kind of person who looks away from injustice because it's uncomfortable. I'm not a child in the system, Lena said quietly. No, Ethan agreed. But you're someone being treated unjustly by the people who should love you most. That's worse in some ways. At least kids in the system know the people failing them are strangers. You're being failed by your own family. The blunt assessment stole Lena's breath. No one had ever said it so clearly before. Oh, she'd known it, had lived it every day of her life. But hearing someone else acknowledge it out loud was like having a wound she'd been hiding suddenly exposed to air. I'm sorry, Ethan said, evidently reading something in her expression. That was too direct. Sarah always said I had the subtlety of a brick through a window. No, Lena managed. No, you're right. It's strange to hear someone else say it. Most people pretend they don't notice, or they make excuses for it. I'm not most people. Ethan's smile was crooked, self-deprecating. And I'm too old and too tired to pretend I don't see what's right in front of me. Before Lena could respond, Sophie returned in a whirlwind of purple tulle and excited energy. There's going to be dancing, she announced. The lady said the bride and groom are going to dance first, and then everybody else can dance, and I want to dance with Daddy, and with Lena too. Lena might not want to dance, Ethan cautioned, but Sophie had already grabbed Lena's good hand, her small fingers warm and insistent. Please, just one dance? I'm a really good dancer. I only stepped on Daddy's feet twice last time. 3 times, Ethan corrected, but he was smiling. Lena looked at this child, this bright, bold, unfiltered little girl who saw her as a person worthy of invitation rather than a problem to be managed. She thought about all the times she'd sat on the sidelines, watching others dance,
watching others participate in the joyful rituals of family and community while she remained always on the outside. "I'd love to dance with you," she heard herself say. Sophie's face lit up like Christmas morning. The music started, something slow and romantic for the bride and groom's first dance. Vanessa looked radiant in her custom gown, her new husband gazing at her with obvious adoration. They moved together flawlessly, a perfect picture of love and beauty and everything the Parker family valued. Lena watched from Ethan's table and felt nothing. Or perhaps not nothing. Perhaps a sense of sad recognition that she would never be what Vanessa was. Would never be the golden child, the favored one, the daughter who made their parents proud. But maybe, for the first time, she was beginning to think that was okay. When the bridal dance ended and the floor opened to other guests, Sophie dragged Lena up with enthusiasm that couldn't be denied. They joined several other parent-child pairs on the floor, and if their dancing was more enthusiastic than graceful, Sophie didn't seem to care. "You're really good," Sophie declared, even though Lena was mostly just swaying and occasionally spinning the little girl when the music called for it. "So are you," Lena said, and meant it. Sophie danced with the unself-conscious joy that only children possess, throwing herself into every movement with complete abandon, unconcerned with how she looked or what anyone thought. When had Lena lost that? When had she started measuring every action against the fear of judgment? She couldn't remember a time when she hadn't been aware of her difference, hadn't felt the weight of being less than what her family wanted. The song ended and transitioned into something faster. Sophie grabbed Ethan and pulled him onto the floor, and he went with the long-suffering patience of a father who knew resistance was futile. Lena started to step aside, but Ethan caught her hand. "You should stay," he said, "if you want to." It wasn't an obligation, wasn't pity, just an invitation, freely offered, freely declined if she chose. Lena stayed. They danced, Ethan and Sophie and Lena, in a small circle, moving to music that was probably too loud and too fast for elegant waltzing. Sophie giggled and spun and occasionally crashed into Ethan's legs with the graceless enthusiasm of childhood. Lena found herself laughing too, genuine laughter that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside. From her position on the dance floor, Lena could see her family's table clearly. Her father was talking to someone, not watching the dancers. Her mother was focused on her phone, likely already working on damage control, reaching out to guests, shaping the narrative, explaining away whatever scene she imagined was unfolding. But Vanessa was watching. The bride stood beside her new husband, her expression unreadable, and for just a moment her eyes met Lena's across the crowded floor. Lena had spent her entire life trying to read her sister's expressions, trying to figure out what Vanessa wanted or needed or expected from her, trying to be good enough, quiet enough, invisible enough to deserve even scraps of affection. But in that moment, she realized something profound. She didn't care anymore what Vanessa thought. The song ended. Ethan was breathing hard, clearly not used to this much movement. Sophie was beaming, her cheeks flushed with exertion. "Can we get cake now?" she asked. "I was really good and danced with lots of people, so I think I deserve cake." "I think you probably do," Ethan agreed. He glanced at Lena. "Will you join us?" And Lena, who had spent 22 years hidden behind plants and tucked into corners and told to be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion were thrown her way, said yes. They returned to the table where the promised cake had arrived, towering slices of white chocolate raspberry that looked almost too elegant to eat. Sophie dug in with enthusiasm. Carol was regaling her husband with some story about their daughter's college adventures. The other couples at the table were engaged in their own conversations, comfortable and easy. Lena picked up her fork and realized, with a strange sense of dislocation, that she felt almost normal, not hidden, not ashamed, just present. "Thank you," she said quietly to Ethan, "for what you did tonight." Ethan set down his own fork and looked at her seriously. "You don't need to thank me for basic human decency." "Maybe not," Lena agreed, "but I'm going to anyway. You didn't have to do any of this. You risked making things awkward for yourself, for your work relationships. If my work relationships are threatened because I refuse to watch someone being mistreated, then they're not relationships worth having." Ethan's voice was firm. "Besides, Robert's the groom. He wasn't going to notice or care, and everyone else at this table, He gestured around at the Ashford Group employees and their spouses. They all saw what I saw. They were just too polite to say anything. Is that true? Lena asked Carol, who was close enough to have been listening. Carol set down her wine glass. Absolutely true. James and I were appalled when we saw where they'd put you. We were actually discussing whether to say something when Ethan beat us to it. She reached across the table and patted Lena's hand. What they did tonight was unconscionable. Family shouldn't treat family that way. But they do, Lena said quietly. Some families do. Then they don't deserve to be called family, Sophie piped up, chocolate frosting smeared across her chin. Family is supposed to be nice to you, like how Daddy is nice to me and I'm nice to Daddy and we're nice to Grandpa and Grandma, even though they live far away. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. The evening wore on. The dancing continued. Guests mingled and laughed and celebrated the union of two people who apparently loved each other enough to make promises in front of hundreds of witnesses. From where she sat, at a real table with real people, no longer hidden, Lena watched it all with a strange sense of detachment. This was supposed to be her family. These people, her parents, her sister, the extended network of aunts and uncles and cousins who'd also pretended not to notice her segregation tonight, they were supposed to be the people who loved her most in the world. Instead, it had taken a widowed stranger and his 7-year-old daughter to show her what basic kindness looked like. Around 10 o'clock, Sophie started to fade. The excitement and sugar and late hour were catching up with her, and she drooped against Ethan's side like a flower wilting in fast motion. I should get her home, Ethan said regretfully. It's past her bedtime by about 2 hours. Thank you, Lena said again. Really, tonight would have been unbearable without you both. What will you do? Ethan asked. After this? Will you be okay? The question caught Lena off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked if she would be okay? I live on my own, she said. Small apartment off campus. I'll catch a bus home, same as I came. Ethan frowned. Buses are probably not running this late. I'll figure it out. I always do. We could give you a ride, he offered. It's not far out of our way, probably. Pride warred with practicality. Pride said she should refuse, should maintain her independence, should prove she didn't need help. Practicality said it was nearly 11 at night and the bus routes were spotty at best, and the Parker family certainly wasn't going to offer her a ride. If it's really not an inconvenience, she said carefully. It's not. Ethan stood, lifting Sophie into his arms. The little girl wrapped her arms around his neck and murmured something incoherent into his shoulder. Let me say goodbye to a few people, then we can go. They made their way toward the exit, pausing for Ethan to shake hands with Robert and wish him well. The groom, a tall man with friendly eyes, seemed genuinely pleased with the well wishes and barely glanced at Lena, which was fine. She was used to being overlooked. They were almost to the door when Vanessa intercepted them. The bride's expression was complicated, anger and confusion and something that might have been hurt, all tangled together beneath her perfect makeup. Lena, she said, I need to talk to you. Vanessa. Lena kept her voice neutral. Congratulations on your wedding. It was beautiful. Don't. Vanessa glanced at Ethan and Sophie, clearly uncomfortable having this conversation in front of witnesses. Can we talk? Privately? Sophie needs to get to bed, Lena said, which was true, but also a convenient excuse. It will just take a minute. Vanessa's voice had taken on a pleading quality that Lena had rarely heard. Please? Ethan looked at Lena, eyebrows raised in question. The choice was hers. 1 minute, Lena agreed. They stepped aside into a small alcove near the coat check. Ethan stayed within sight, but out of earshot, giving them privacy while clearly remaining available if Lena needed him. What were you doing? Vanessa hissed as soon as they were alone. You made a scene. You embarrassed me in front of all my guests. I sat at a different table, Lena interrupted. That's all. I accepted an invitation from a kind stranger. How is that embarrassing you? You were supposed to stay where Mom put you. Behind a plant? Lena's voice was sharper than she'd intended. Hidden away like something shameful? Why, Vanessa? Why does my presence at your wedding need to be concealed? Vanessa's face flushed. You know why. The photos.
The photos. Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yes. Can't have me in the photos. Can't have anyone remember that the Parker family has an imperfect daughter. God forbid someone see that you have a sister who's missing an arm. That's not fair, but what's not fair, Lena said, and her voice was shaking now, is that I have spent my entire life trying to be invisible so I wouldn't embarrass you.
What's not fair is that I came to your wedding, Vanessa, and you couldn't even look at me during your speech. You thanked the florist. You thanked the woman who made your cake. But you couldn't say one word about your own sister. Vanessa's eyes were wet now, but Lena couldn't tell if the tears were genuine or performative.
You don't understand. Then help me understand, Lena challenged. Tell me why. Tell me what I did wrong that made this family hate me so much. We don't hate you. Then why do you treat me like you do? The words burst out of Lena, 2 decades of suppressed pain finally finding voice. Why have you spent my entire life making me feel like I was a burden? A mistake? Something to be ashamed of? Vanessa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. And in that moment of hesitation, Lena saw the truth written clearly on her sister's face. Vanessa didn't have an answer. Or worse, she did have an answer, but it was one she wasn't willing to speak aloud. I have to go, Lena said quietly. Thank you for inviting me to your wedding. I hope you and Robert are very happy together. She turned and walked away before Vanessa could respond, before the tears that were threatening could actually fall. Ethan fell into step beside her without comment, Sophie drowsing in his arms. They made it outside into the cool night air before Lena's composure finally cracked. She stopped on the marble steps of the Ashford estate, one hand pressed to her mouth, trying desperately to keep the sobs contained. Hey, Ethan said gently. Hey, it's okay. Let it out. And because he was a stranger, because he had no expectations of her, no history with her, no investment in maintaining the careful fiction that the Parker family was anything other than broken, Lena did. She cried. 22 years of hurt and rejection and desperate longing for a family that would never love her the way she needed. She cried for the little girl who'd watched her sister receive elaborate birthday parties while she got grocery store cupcakes. For the teenager who'd heard her parents explain to relatives that they only really wanted one child while she was standing right there. For every moment she'd been made to feel less than, other than, never quite enough. Ethan didn't try to stop her or minimize her pain with empty platitudes. He just stood there, solid and steady, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, while Sophie slept against his chest, oblivious to the adult grief unfolding around her. When the tears finally subsided, leaving Lena empty and exhausted, Ethan offered her a handkerchief, an actual cloth handkerchief, like something from another era. My wife always insisted I carry one, he said as Lena took it. Said you never know when someone might need it. Your wife sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Ethan's voice was soft with memory and old grief. She would have liked you, would have been furious about what happened in there tonight. They stood there for a moment longer, the sounds of the wedding reception muffled by distance and marble walls. Then Ethan shifted Sophie's weight and gestured toward the parking lot. Come on, he said. Let's get you home. The drive back to Lena's apartment was quiet. Sophie had fallen fully asleep in her car seat, and Lena was too wrung out for conversation. She directed Ethan through the darkened streets, finally pointing out a worn apartment complex on the edge of campus. This is me, she said. Ethan pulled up to the curb and put the car in park. For a moment, neither of them spoke. I don't want to overstep, he said finally, but if you need anything, if your family makes things difficult, or if you just need someone to talk to, I'm willing to listen. He pulled a business card from his wallet and offered it to her. That's my cell. Don't hesitate to use it. Lena took the card, running her thumb over the embossed text. Ethan Miller, Senior Project Manager, Ashford Group, a lifeline, offered freely. Thank you, she said. I don't know if I'll need it, but thank you. Take care of yourself, Lena Parker, Ethan said. You deserve better than what they're giving you. Lena climbed out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, watching as Ethan drove away into the night. The business card felt heavy in her hand, weighted with possibility, with the strange and terrifying prospect that maybe, just maybe, there were people in the world who would choose her,
who would see her as something other than a disappointment or a burden. She let herself into her tiny studio apartment, barely more than a room with a kitchenette, but it was hers, and sat down on the edge of her bed. Her phone had multiple texts from her mother, each one more furious than the last. Demands that she come home immediately. Accusations of ruining Vanessa's special day. Threats of consequences if she didn't fix this, apologize, make things right. Lena stared at the messages for a long moment. Then, with hands that only trembled slightly, she typed out a single response. I'm not coming home. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I'm done being your family's shameful secret. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she turned off her phone, tucked Ethan's business card carefully into her wallet, and lay down in the darkness of her small apartment. Tomorrow would bring consequences. Tomorrow would bring her mother's wrath and her father's disappointed silence and Vanessa's tearful accusations. But tonight, for the first time in her 22 years, Lena Parker had chosen herself, and that, somehow, felt like a revolution. The morning after the wedding arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Lena woke to the sound of her phone buzzing with relentless fury, text after text, call after call, each notification a small detonation of family rage. She'd turned the phone back on at 7, hoping perhaps the night had cooled her mother's temper. That hope died within 30 seconds. There were 43 messages, 17 missed calls, 3 voicemails that Lena couldn't bring herself to listen to because she could see their duration, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes of what she knew would be vitriol dressed up as parental concern. The texts from her mother started relatively restrained and deteriorated rapidly. The early ones demanded she come home immediately to discuss her behavior. By midnight, they devolved into threats about cutting off what little financial support they provided, her phone bill, the occasional grocery money when things got tight. The final message, sent at 2 a.m, was just 3 words: "You ungrateful child." Vanessa's texts were different. Hurt rather than angry, pleading rather than demanding. "You ruined my wedding. How could you do this to me? Everyone is talking about it. Mom is furious. Dad won't even speak. Please call me. Please fix this." Lena sat on her bed, really just a mattress on a frame she'd found at a thrift store, and stared at her phone. The smart thing would be to apologize, to grovel, to beg forgiveness for the unforgivable sin of accepting an invitation from a stranger instead of remaining hidden behind decorative foliage like the family embarrassment she was supposed to be. The smart thing would be to go back. But something had shifted last night, something fundamental. Maybe it was the way Ethan had looked at her, not with pity, but with anger on her behalf. Maybe it was Sophie's guileless observation that hiding people was mean. Maybe it was simply that she'd finally reached the breaking point that 22 years of rejection had been building toward. Whatever it was, Lena found she couldn't make herself care about being smart anymore. She typed out a message to her mother. "I'll come get my things this afternoon." Then she turned off her phone again and sat in the silence of her apartment, listening to the sounds of the complex waking up around her. A baby crying somewhere above, a couple arguing in Spanish next door, the rumble of traffic from the street below, the ordinary sounds of ordinary lives. She'd never felt more alone or more free. By noon, Lena had worked up the courage to actually go back to the Parker house. She borrowed a friend's car, Maya, her study partner from child development class, who asked no questions when Lena showed up looking exhausted and asked for help moving. Maya just grabbed her keys and said, "Let's go." The Parker house was in Riverside Estates, a gated community where every lawn looked like it had been manicured with nail scissors, and every house cost more than most people earned in a decade. Lena had grown up in this neighborhood, but had never felt like she belonged here. The wealth was isolating, the perfection suffocating. Everyone smiled and no one saw anything wrong. She used her key, wondered how long before her mother changed the locks, and stepped into the marble foyer. The house was silent in the heavy way that meant people were home but not speaking. The air itself felt thick with suppressed fury. "Lena?" Her father's voice came from his study. "Is that you?" Richard Parker appeared in the doorway of his home office, still wearing his reading glasses, looking older than Lena remembered. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time, not as the distant father figure she'd spent her life trying to please, but as a man who'd made a choice to prioritize appearance over his own daughter's well-being. "I'm here to get my things," Lena said, Her voice was steadier than she'd expected. "Your mother wants to speak with you." "I'm sure she does." Lena moved toward the stairs. "I'll be quick." "Lena." Her father's voice took on the tone he used in business negotiations. Firm, reasonable, expecting compliance. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Come sit down. Let's talk about this like adults." "Adults," Lena repeated, and something sharp edged into her voice. "Is that what we're calling it when you hide your daughter behind plants at a family wedding?" Her father's expression flickered, a moment of something that might have been shame before his composure reasserted itself. "That's not fair. Your mother was trying to make you comfortable. By segregating me from the other guests, by putting me at a folding table like I was party staff, that was for my comfort?" Lena shook her head. "No, Dad. That was for your comfort, for Mom's comfort, for Vanessa's comfort. Everything has always been about everyone else's comfort. Well, I'm not comfortable anymore. So I'm leaving." "You're being dramatic." Patricia's voice came from the top of the stairs. She descended like a queen addressing her subjects, regal, composed, utterly in control. She was dressed impeccably, even on a Sunday morning, every hair in place, makeup applied with precision. "One incident and you're going to throw away your family." "One incident?" The words came out louder than Lena intended. "One incident? Mom, you've been throwing me away my entire life. Yesterday was just the first time you did it in front of 300 witnesses." Patricia's jaw tightened. "We have given you everything. A roof over your head, food, education. You gave Vanessa everything," Lena corrected. "You gave me the bare minimum required to not be reported to child services. There's a difference." "How dare you?" Patricia's composure cracked, fury bleeding through. "After everything we've sacrificed for you, do you know what it was like raising a child with your condition? The stares, the questions, the pity from everyone who saw us? The way people looked at our family like something was wrong?" There it was. The truth that had always lurked beneath every careful explanation, every rationalization, every time they'd positioned her just outside the frame of a family photo. "Something is wrong with your family," Lena said quietly. "But it's not my missing arm. It's your missing compassion." Patricia recoiled as if she'd been slapped. Richard made a sound like he wanted to intervene, but didn't know how. In the silence that followed, Lena heard footsteps and turned to see Vanessa standing in the doorway to the kitchen, still in her pajamas, her eyes red and swollen. "Do you even care that you ruined my wedding?" Vanessa's voice was thick with tears. "That every single person there is now talking about the scene you caused instead of my marriage?" "I didn't cause a scene," Lena said. "I sat at a different table. That's all. If that's enough to overshadow your entire wedding, maybe you should ask yourself why." "Because you made everything about you." Vanessa's voice rose, hysteria creeping in. "My special day, and you had to go, and I made nothing about me," Lena interrupted. "I have spent my entire life making myself small so you could shine brighter. I have swallowed every slight, every rejection, every casual cruelty, so that you could have your perfect life. And when I finally accepted a basic act of human kindness from a stranger, you call it making things about me?" "He was nobody," Vanessa spat. "Some random work contact of Robert's. You made us look like we abuse you." "You do abuse me." The words hung in the air like a verdict. "Maybe not physically, but emotionally? You've been starving me my entire life and expecting me to be grateful for scraps." Patricia stepped forward, her expression dangerous. "If you walk out of this house right now, don't expect to be welcomed back. We will not tolerate this disrespect. We will not be manipulated by your victim narrative." "It's not a narrative," Lena said. "It's just what happened. And I'm done pretending otherwise." She climbed the stairs to her childhood bedroom, the smallest room in the house, tucked away at the end of the hall like an afterthought. The walls were bare because Patricia had never wanted her to clutter them up with posters or pictures. The furniture was hand-me-down pieces from when Vanessa had upgraded to a designer bedroom set at 14. Everything about the space screamed temporary, unwanted, barely tolerated. Lena grabbed her duffel bag from the closet and began packing. Clothes, books, the few personal items she'd accumulated. It didn't take long, she'd never been encouraged to have much, and what she did own fit easily into 2 bags. She was zipping up the second when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She turned it back on for navigation, and now messages were flooding in again. But this time, mixed in with her family's fury, there was something else. A text from an unknown number. "This is Carol Davidson from the wedding last night. Ethan gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to check in and see if you're all right. What happened last night wasn't right. If you need anything, please reach out." Then another, from a different unknown number. "Hi Lena, this is James Davidson, Carol's husband. I work with your brother-in-law Robert. I want you to know that several of us from last night have had conversations with him this morning. What your family did was unconscionable. We've made sure Robert understands that. You have support if you need it." Lena sat down hard on her bed, staring at her phone. These people, virtual strangers, were checking on her, offering support, holding her family accountable in ways her own relatives never had. A knock on her doorframe made her look up. Maya stood there, taking in the sparse room with wide eyes. "This is your bedroom?" Maya asked quietly. "I've seen dorm rooms with more personality." "I wasn't exactly encouraged to personalize." Lena stood, shouldering both bags. "I'm ready to go." They made it to the front door before Patricia blocked their path one final time. "If you leave now," she said, her voice cold and precise, "we're done. No more money, no more phone, no more pretending we're a family. You'll be on your own." Lena looked at her mother, this woman who'd given birth to her but had never truly wanted her, who'd seen her as a burden, a disappointment, a flaw in an otherwise perfect life. And she felt something inside her settle into a kind of sad certainty. "We've never been a family," Lena said. "Not really, so I'm not losing anything I ever actually had." She walked out the door, Maya beside her, and didn't look back. The next few days passed in a blur of logistics and survival. Her mother made good on her threat. The phone service was cut off by Monday evening. Lena switched to a bare-bones prepaid plan she could barely afford. The small amount of money her parents had been depositing monthly for groceries stopped immediately. Her father sent a single email. "Your mother and I believe this separation is best for everyone. We hope you'll reconsider your behavior and rejoin the family when you're ready to apologize." Lena deleted it without responding. She picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore where she worked part-time. Maya helped her apply for additional student aid. Her advisor in the child development program connected her with a paid internship at the youth center where she volunteered. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hers. On Wednesday evening, Lena found herself staring at Ethan's business card. She'd carried it in her wallet since Saturday night, not sure what she'd intended to do with it. Part of her wanted to call, to thank him again, to tell him that his simple act of kindness had given her the courage to finally break free. Part of her was terrified that if she reached out, she'd discover that the warmth and concern he'd shown had just been situational, a good man having a generous moment, not someone who actually wanted to stay connected to her problems. Before she could talk herself out of it, she texted the number. "This is Lena Parker from the wedding. I wanted to let you know I took your advice. I chose my dignity. Thank you for showing me what that could look like." The response came within minutes. "Proud of you. That takes real courage. How are you holding up?" Lena found herself smiling at her phone, a small, genuine expression that felt foreign on her face. She typed, "Honestly, terrified, but also lighter than I've felt in years. That's normal. Change is scary even when it's necessary. Listen, Sophie has been asking about you. She wants to know if you're okay. Would you want to get coffee sometime? No pressure. Coffee. Such a normal thing, such an ordinary invitation. And yet it felt monumental. This man she barely knew, offering continued kindness with no ulterior motive, no conditions attached. I'd like that, she typed back. They met on Saturday at a small cafe near campus. Sophie arrived wearing a bright yellow dress and immediately launched into an enthusiastic update about her week. A math test she'd aced. A girl at school who'd been mean, but who Sophie had decided to be nice to anyway because sometimes people are mean because they're sad inside. And a new book about dragons that her daddy had been reading to her at bedtime. Sophie was worried about you, Ethan said once his daughter had exhausted her initial burst of conversation and turned her attention to a chocolate chip muffin. She kept asking if the lady from the wedding was going to be okay. I'm okay, Lena said, and was surprised to realize it was mostly true. Things are difficult, but I'm managing. Your family? Haven't spoken to them since I moved out Sunday. My mother cut off my phone and the grocery money. My dad sent one email telling me to apologize and come back when I was ready to behave. Lena took a sip of her coffee. I'm not going back. Ethan's expression was grave. That's financial abuse. Using money to control your behavior. I know. Lena had learned the term in one of her child development classes, had recognized it intellectually. Applying it to her own life still felt strange. But I'm an adult. I can manage. You shouldn't have to just manage, Ethan said quietly. You should be thriving. Sophie looked up from her muffin, chocolate smeared across her chin. Are your mommy and daddy still being mean? Sophie, Ethan said gently, that's not… It's okay, Lena interrupted. She looked at the little girl and saw only genuine concern, no judgment, no pity, just the straightforward empathy that children possess before the world teaches them to look away. Yeah, they're still being mean, so I'm staying away from them for a while. Sophie absorbed this information seriously. That's good. Mrs. Chen says we should stay away from people who are mean to us, even if they're family. She says family is supposed to be the people who love you, not the people who hurt you. Mrs. Chen sounds very wise, Lena said. She's my therapist, Sophie explained matter-of-factly. I see her because Mommy died, and sometimes I get sad about it. She helps me talk about feelings. Lena glanced at Ethan, who shrugged slightly. We don't hide therapy in this house. Sophie knows it's a normal, healthy thing to talk about emotions with a professional. I wish more families thought that way, Lena said. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily despite the weight of the topics they covered. Ethan asked about her studies, her internship, her plans after graduation. He talked about his work, something involving project management for urban development that Lena didn't entirely understand but that he clearly cared about. Sophie interjected periodically with observations about school or requests for Lena's opinion on important matters, like whether purple or yellow was a better color for dragons. It was remarkably normal, remarkably comfortable, and that comfort made Lena nervous in a way she couldn't quite articulate. Why are you doing this? She asked finally, when Sophie had gotten up to look at the cafe's display case of pastries. Being kind to me, checking in. You don't owe me anything. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. My wife grew up in foster care, he said finally. Bounced around from age 6 until she aged out at 18. Some homes were okay, some were less okay. She used to say that what saved her wasn't any one person or any one moment. It was the accumulation of small kindnesses from people who didn't have to care, but chose to anyway. A teacher who noticed she wasn't eating lunch and started bringing extra. A foster sister who shared her clothes even though they weren't technically supposed to. A social worker who actually listened. He paused, his expression distant with memory. She said those small acts taught her that she was worth caring about, even when the world seemed determined to prove otherwise. I'm not a foster kid, Lena said quietly. No, Ethan agreed. But you're someone whose family has spent your entire life teaching you that you're not worth caring about. And I refuse to be one more person who reinforces that lesson. He met her eyes steadily. You're worth caring about, Lena. Not because of what you can do or how you look or whether you fit someone else's definition of perfect. Just because you're a person who exists and deserves kindness. Lena felt her throat tighten dangerously. She'd spent so long armoring herself against rejection, the genuine acceptance felt almost painful, like blood rushing back into a limb that had fallen asleep. Thank you, she managed. Sophie returned with a sugar cookie in the shape of a cat and declared that they should all go to the park because sitting is boring and moving is better. Ethan looked at Lena questioningly, and she found herself nodding. They spent the afternoon at a small neighborhood park, Sophie running between the swings and the slide with inexhaustible energy. Lena and Ethan sat on a bench, watching her play, talking about nothing in particular and everything important. He told her about Sarah's illness, the diagnosis, the treatment, the impossible decisions, the grief that still ambushed him at unexpected moments. She told him about growing up with one arm, about the physical therapy and the well-meaning pity, and the constant sense of being treated like inspiration porn for able-bodied people's comfort. People used to tell my parents how brave they were for keeping me, Lena said, like I was some kind of charity case they could have dumped at a hospital. My mother ate it up. She'd smile and say something about how every child deserves a chance, while I stood right there, hearing the implication that I should be grateful they didn't abandon me. That's grotesque, Ethan said flatly. That's my family. Lena watched Sophie climb the jungle gym with fearless determination. What about you? Is your family supportive? My parents are good people, Ethan said. They live in Oregon now, retired. They were devastated when Sarah died, but they've been there for Sophie and me. My sister is in Seattle, also good. We're not close in proximity, but we're close in the ways that matter. He paused. They were actually horrified when I told them what I witnessed at the wedding. My mother wanted me to give you her number in case you needed a surrogate mom for anything. The casual offer of substitute family made Lena's eyes sting. Your mother sounds lovely. She is. She's also a meddler who will absolutely try to feed you too much and give you unsolicited life advice if you give her an opening. Ethan smiled. But her heart is in the right place. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, they walked back to Ethan's car. A sensible sedan with a booster seat in the back and evidence of child occupancy scattered throughout. Sophie chattered the entire drive back to Lena's apartment complex, explaining in elaborate detail the plot of the dragon book they were reading. The dragon is lonely because everyone is scared of him because he's big and has fire, Sophie explained earnestly. But really he just wants friends. And then a little girl isn't scared, and they become best friends. And she teaches the other people that dragons are nice if you're nice to them first. That sounds like a good story, Lena said. It is. You should read it too. Then we could talk about it together. Sophie's eyes lit up. You could come to our house for dinner and we could read it together. Sophie, Ethan said gently. Lena might be busy. I'd like that, Lena heard herself say. If you're sure I wouldn't be intruding. You wouldn't be, Ethan said firmly. How's Friday night? Friday arrived with Lena's stomach tied in anxious knots. She'd accepted the dinner invitation impulsively, caught up in Sophie's enthusiasm and Ethan's genuine warmth. But now, standing outside their house in a quiet residential neighborhood, she was second-guessing everything. What was she doing here? These people barely knew her. She was inserting herself into their lives, taking advantage of their kindness, being exactly the burden her family had always accused her of being. Before she could talk herself into leaving, the front door opened and Sophie appeared, wearing yet another purple dress and beaming like Lena's arrival was the best thing that had happened all week. You came. I was watching from the window. Come in, come in. I have to show you my room and my stuffed animals and the puzzle I'm working on. Sophie let her breathe, Ethan said, appearing behind his daughter. He was in jeans and a t-shirt, more casual than Lena had seen him, somehow younger looking without the wedding formality. Hi. Come in. Ignore Sophie's overstimulation. I'm not overstimulated, Sophie protested. I'm excited. Mrs. Chen says excited is different from overstimulated. Fair enough. Ethan stepped aside to let Lena enter. You're excited. I'm relieved you actually showed up. I was 50-50 on whether anxiety would win. The casual acknowledgement of her nervousness should have been embarrassing. Instead, it was oddly comforting, like he understood the mental battle she'd fought and wasn't judging her for it. The house was smaller than the Parker mansion, but felt more like a home than anywhere Lena had grown up. There were photos everywhere, Sarah and Ethan's wedding, Sophie as a baby, family trips to beaches and mountains. Artwork that was clearly Sophie's creation hung on the refrigerator. Shoes were piled by the door. Mail sat in a basket on the hall table. Everything spoke of people actually living here, not just staging a perfect backdrop for other people's approval. Sophie, show Lena around while I check on dinner, Ethan said. But brief tour, okay? We're eating in 20 minutes. Sophie grabbed Lena's hand and dragged her through the house with a running commentary on everything they passed. That's Daddy's office, where he does boring work stuff sometimes. That's the bathroom where I take baths and it has a mermaid shower curtain. That's Daddy's room, and we don't go in there without permission because privacy is important, and this is my room. Sophie's bedroom was an explosion of color and personality. Purple walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, bookshelves overflowing with well-loved books, and an impressive collection of stuffed animals arranged on the bed. It was exactly what a 7-year-old's room should be, and it made Lena's chest ache with something she couldn't name. This is Mr. Fluffkins, Sophie said, holding up a bedraggled stuffed rabbit. Mommy gave him to me when I was born. And this is Dragon. I know that's not a very good name, but I named her when I was 4 and now it's too late to change it. And this is..." The tour continued. Each stuffed animal had a name and a backstory. Each book had been read multiple times. Everything in the room spoke of a child who was cherished, whose interests were nurtured, whose personality was celebrated rather than suppressed. "Your room is wonderful," Lena said when Sophie finally wound down. "Daddy says I can paint it any color I want," Sophie said proudly. "I picked purple. He says when I'm older, if I want to change it, I can pick something else." "What color was your room when you were my age?" "White," Lena said. "My mother said it was neutral and sophisticated." Sophie wrinkled her nose. "That sounds boring." It was. They went back downstairs where Ethan had set the table and was pulling a lasagna from the oven. The kitchen smelled amazing. Garlic and tomato and cheese and herbs. It was homemade, Lena realized. Not catered, not picked up from some expensive restaurant. Actually cooked. "I'm not a great chef," Ethan said, catching her expression. "But I can make about 5 things really well. And lasagna is one of them. Sarah's recipe. She was the real cook in the family. I'm just following her instructions." They sat down to eat, and it was chaotic and comfortable in equal measure. Sophie talked constantly, requiring regular reminders to actually eat her food, rather than just narrate every thought that entered her head. Ethan asked Lena about her week, her classes, her internship at the youth center. He listened to her answers with genuine interest, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually paying attention. "The kids at the center are amazing," Lena found herself saying. "Most of them have been through trauma, abuse, neglect, family separation, but they're so resilient, so willing to trust again, if you're patient and consistent." "That's what Sarah always said," Ethan replied. "That kids want to trust adults, they're wired for it. But you have to prove you're trustworthy, you have to show up consistently. You can't promise things you won't deliver." "Exactly." Lena felt something warm unfold in her chest. Too many people make grand promises to these kids and then disappear. It's worse than never promising anything at all. "Do you want to work with kids like that after graduation?" Ethan asked. "I do," Lena said. "I want to be a child advocate. Help kids in the system or in bad family situations. Make sure they have someone fighting for them." She paused, then added quietly, "I needed someone like that when I was growing up. I want to be that person for other kids." Ethan's expression was difficult to read. "You'll be good at it." After dinner, they moved to the living room. Sophie insisted on showing Lena the Dragon book, which led to Ethan reading it aloud while Sophie provided commentary, and Lena found herself genuinely invested in whether the dragon and the girl would convince the village that dragons could be friends. Somewhere around chapter 3, Sophie curled up against Lena's side, her small body warm and trusting. The gesture was so casual, so natural, as if Sophie had known her for years rather than days, and Lena found herself carefully putting her arm around the little girl's shoulders, holding her breath, waiting for someone to tell her she was overstepping. No one did. Ethan just kept reading, his voice steady and warm, glancing up occasionally to meet Lena's eyes with something that looked like approval. When the chapter ended, Sophie was drowsy, fighting sleep with the determination of children everywhere who don't want the day to end. "Bedtime," Ethan announced, and Sophie groaned dramatically. "But Lena just got here." "Lena will come back," Ethan said. Then he looked at Lena. "Right?" It was a question, not an assumption. An invitation freely offered, freely declined if she chose. And Lena found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "I'd like to come back," she said. Sophie's face lit up. "Promise?" "I promise." Ethan carried Sophie upstairs for her bedtime routine, and Lena sat alone in the living room, surrounded by evidence of this small, warm family. Photos of Sarah smiled down from the walls, a beautiful woman with Ethan's same gray eyes, and a smile that looked like it came easily. She'd been loved. That was clear in every image, and she'd loved back, fiercely and without reservation. Lena wondered what that felt like. To be loved like that. To love like that. Ethan returned 20 minutes later, looking tired but content. She went down easier than usual. I think having company wore her out. He sat down on the couch, a careful distance away from Lena, but not so far as to seem standoffish. Thank you for coming tonight. Sophie's been looking forward to it all week. Thank you for inviting me, Lena said. You have no idea what this means to me, having a place where I'm actually wanted. You're wanted here, Ethan said simply. Sophie adores you, and I like having you around. You're easy to talk to. You don't require performance or pretense. That's rare. They talked for another hour, the conversation drifting from heavy topics to lighter ones and back again. Ethan told her about his work stress, about navigating single parenthood, about the loneliness that still caught him off guard 3 years after Sarah's death. Lena told him about her studies, about her dreams of making a difference, about the fear that she'd somehow inherited her family's capacity for emotional distance and would end up hurting people the way she'd been hurt. You won't, Ethan said with certainty. Awareness is the first step to breaking cycles. You're already doing the work. When Lena finally left around 10, Ethan walked her to her borrowed car. The night was cool, quiet, full of the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood settling in for sleep. Drive safe, he said. Text when you get home so I know you made it. You don't have to worry about me, Lena protested. I know I don't have to. Ethan's smile was soft in the porch light. I want to. There's a difference. Lena drove home with those words echoing in her head. I want to. Not obligated to, not forced to, not guilted into. Just want to. Simple human caring, freely given. She was beginning to understand that this was what family was supposed to feel like. And her actual family, predictably, was about to remind her why she'd left. The summons came 3 weeks later, delivered not through her disconnected phone or her father's terse emails, but through Vanessa herself. Lena was leaving her shift at the campus bookstore when she found her sister waiting by the bike rack, looking uncharacteristically disheveled in jeans and an oversized sweater, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. We need to talk, Vanessa said without preamble. Lena's first instinct was to refuse, to walk past her sister and pretend this encounter wasn't happening. But something in Vanessa's expression stopped her. Not anger or accusation, but something that looked almost like desperation. About what? Lena asked carefully. About what happened. About everything. Vanessa glanced around the parking lot as if checking for witnesses. Can we go somewhere? Get coffee or something? I don't think that's a good idea. Please. The word came out raw, unpolished. I'm not here to yell at you or make demands. I need to talk to someone who might actually tell me the truth. Against her better judgment, Lena agreed. They ended up at the same cafe where she'd met Ethan and Sophie weeks earlier, sitting across from each other at a small table near the window. Vanessa ordered an elaborate latte with extra espresso. Lena stuck with black coffee she couldn't really afford but needed for this conversation. Robert moved out, Vanessa said abruptly once they were seated. 3 days ago. He's staying at a hotel while we figure things out. Lena blinked, genuinely surprised. What happened? People from the wedding kept talking to him. Vanessa's voice was brittle. His colleagues, the Ashford Group people. They told him what they saw, how you were treated, how Mom and Dad handled it, and he started asking questions I couldn't answer. She took a shaky sip of her latte. He asked me why my own sister was sitting alone at my wedding, why you were hidden behind plants, why none of us acknowledged you during the speeches. And what did you say? At first I made excuses, said you preferred it that way, that you got overwhelmed in crowds, all the lies Mom fed me over the years. Vanessa's hands trembled around her cup. But Robert is smart. He's worked with enough dysfunctional family systems through his job. He consults on corporate culture and leadership dynamics. He knows what emotional abuse looks like, and he saw it. In our family, in me. Lena didn't know what to say to that. The vindication felt hollow rather than satisfying. He said he couldn't be married to someone who participated in treating family that way, Vanessa continued. He said I had a choice, either get help and start addressing the damage, or he was done. He doesn't want to bring children into a family system like ours. Her voice cracked. So now my marriage is falling apart 3 weeks in, and Mom blames you. Of course she does, Lena said quietly. I blamed you too.
At first, Vanessa finally met Lena's eyes. I was so angry. At you, at Robert, at everyone who made my perfect wedding into this disaster. But then I started thinking about what Robert said, about how I participated, how I've always participated. She paused, seeming to gather courage. Do you remember my 10th birthday party? Lena remembered. She'd been 8, excited to celebrate her sister's special day. Patricia had spent weeks planning an elaborate princess party, a rented hall, professional entertainment, designer decorations. Vanessa had been allowed to invite her entire class plus friends from dance and soccer. Lena had invited 3 kids from her own class, girls who'd been nice to her despite her missing arm. The night before the party, Patricia had sat Lena down and explained that there wasn't enough room for her friends. The venue was at capacity. Maybe next year. Lena could still come to the party, of course, but she'd need to understand that this was Vanessa's special day, and she shouldn't expect attention. The next day, Lena had watched from a corner as Vanessa opened presents and blew out candles and danced with all her friends. The 3 girls Lena had invited never knew they'd been uninvited. Lena had been too ashamed to tell them, too young to understand that the shame wasn't hers to carry. I remember, Lena said. I knew your friends were uninvited, Vanessa said. Mom told me she had to make room for more of my friends, and I was happy about it. Happy that I got more attention, more people celebrating me. I was 10, and I was already learning that your happiness was less important than mine. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. That was just one incident, but there were hundreds of them, weren't there? 1,000 small cruelties that taught both of us our places. Yes, Lena said simply. I'm not asking you to forgive me. Vanessa's voice was steadier now, more determined. I don't deserve forgiveness. I participated in hurting you for 22 years because it benefited me, because it was easier than standing up to Mom and Dad, because I was selfish and weak, and I told myself it wasn't that bad. She took a breath. But Robert made me see that it was that bad, that what our family did to you was abuse, and I either acknowledge that and try to change, or I lose him. And maybe I deserve to lose him, but I don't want to be that person anymore. Lena studied her sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But Vanessa looked genuinely wrecked, red-eyed, pale, stripped of the polished confidence that usually armored her. What do you want from me? Lena asked. Nothing, Vanessa said. I don't want anything. I needed you to know that I'm seeing it now, really seeing it. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for all of it. The apology hung between them like something fragile. Lena wanted to accept it, wanted to believe that her sister was capable of real change. But 22 years of disappointment had taught her to be cautious with hope. Are you in therapy? Lena asked. Vanessa nodded. Started last week. Robert insisted. He gave me names of people who specialize in family systems and trauma. I have my 2nd session tomorrow. That's good, Lena said carefully. That's a good start. Is there any chance? Vanessa started, then stopped, seeming to reconsider. No, never mind. You don't owe me anything. What were you going to ask? If there was any chance we could have a relationship, Vanessa said quietly. Not now. Not until I've done the work. But someday. If I prove I've actually changed, if I can be the sister you deserved all along. Lena considered the question. A month ago, she would have said no immediately. Would have protected herself from further disappointment by cutting off all possibility of reconnection. But Ethan's kindness had cracked something open in her, a willingness to believe that people could be better than their worst moments, that change was possible if someone truly committed to it. Maybe someday, she said finally. But Vanessa, you need to understand something. I can't be the one to fix your marriage or your relationship with our parents. I can't be your redemption project. If you're going to change, it has to be because you want to be a better person, not because you're trying to win back Robert or prove something to me. I know, Vanessa said. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm just asking you not to close the door completely. They talked for another 30 minutes, the conversation stilted and painful and occasionally edging toward real honesty. Vanessa asked about Lena's life now, and Lena found herself talking about her internship, her classes, the youth center. She carefully didn't mention Ethan or Sophie. That part of her life felt too precious to expose to family scrutiny. When they parted ways in the parking lot, Vanessa hugged her awkwardly.
Thank you for listening, she said. I know I don't deserve it. No, Lena agreed. But maybe that's not the point. She drove back to her apartment feeling unsettled, the conversation replaying in her mind. Part of her wanted to believe Vanessa was sincere. Part of her knew that wanting something didn't make it real. People said they'd change all the time. Actually doing it was much harder. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Sophie wants to know if you're coming for dinner Sunday. She's campaigning hard for pizza and a movie. Fair warning, her movie taste runs toward animated animals with improbable adventures. The message made Lena smile despite her emotional exhaustion. She typed back, Animated animals sound perfect. I'll bring dessert. You don't have to bring anything. Just yourself. I want to, she wrote, echoing his words from weeks ago. There's a difference. The response was immediate. Fair enough. See you Sunday. Sunday dinner became a regular occurrence, then twice a week. Then Lena found herself at Ethan's house more often than her own apartment, staying for dinner and movies, helping Sophie with homework, learning to cook beside Ethan in a kitchen that smelled like garlic and laughter instead of criticism and control. You're here a lot, Sophie observed one evening in November, her tone matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. They were working on a puzzle together while Ethan graded project proposals at the dining table. Daddy says that's good. He says everyone needs people who feel like home. Do I feel like home? Lena asked, curious. Sophie considered this seriously. Kind of, like how Grandma and Grandpa's house feels like home, but different than our house. Both homes, but different kinds. She placed a puzzle piece with satisfaction. Mrs. Chen says home is where you feel safe to be yourself. Do you feel safe here? The question was so direct, so earnest, that Lena found herself answering honestly. Yes, I feel very safe here. Good, Sophie beamed. Then it's home. From his position at the table, Ethan caught Lena's eye and smiled, soft and warm and something else she couldn't quite name. Thanksgiving approached, bringing with it an invitation Lena hadn't expected. Ethan's parents were coming to visit from Oregon, and he asked if she'd like to join them for the holiday. You don't have to, he said quickly when Lena hesitated. I know meeting parents can be overwhelming. And my mother is a lot. She means well, but she's going to ask you 100 questions and probably try to feed you until you burst. If it's too much, I completely understand. It's not too much, Lena said. I'm just surprised. Are you sure your parents want a stranger at their family holiday? First of all, you're not a stranger, not anymore. And second, I already told them about you. They're excited to meet you. Ethan's expression turned more serious. They know what happened at the wedding. They know about your family situation. And my mother specifically said to tell you that everyone deserves a family Thanksgiving. And if your biological family won't provide that, then we will. Lena felt her throat tighten. Your mother said that? Direct quote. She's very emphatic about these things. Sarah used to say my mother collected strays, people who needed a place to belong. I think you'd like her. So Lena spent Thanksgiving at Ethan's house, helping his mother Margaret in the kitchen while his father Thomas entertained Sophie with card tricks in the living room. Margaret was exactly as advertised. Warm and opinionated, and absolutely determined to make sure Lena ate enough for 3 people. Ethan told us what happened at that wedding, Margaret said while basting the turkey. That poor excuse for a family you came from. I wanted to drive down here and give your mother a piece of my mind. Mom, Ethan said from the doorway, his tone long suffering. You promised to be subtle. I'm being perfectly subtle, Margaret protested. I haven't said half the things I'm thinking. She turned back to Lena. You're welcome here any time, sweetheart. This house, our house in Oregon. Anywhere we are. You need a family, you've got one. The casual declaration made Lena's vision blur. She excused herself to the bathroom and cried quietly for 5 minutes, overwhelmed by the sheer kindness of people who'd known her for less than 3 months, but had already claimed her as their own. When she emerged, Sophie was waiting in the hallway, concern written across her small face. Are you sad? No, Lena said and meant it. I'm happy. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. Oh. Sophie absorbed this. Daddy does that sometimes. When he looks at pictures of Mommy, he says it's okay to be sad and happy at the same time. Your daddy is very smart. Dinner was chaotic and loud and wonderful.
Thomas told embarrassing stories about Ethan's childhood. Margaret kept passing Lena more food. Sophie provided running commentary on everything and had to be reminded repeatedly to actually eat. It was exactly what Lena had imagined family dinners should be, full of laughter and gentle teasing and genuine affection. After dinner, while the adults cleaned up and Sophie watched a movie, Margaret cornered Lena in the kitchen. "My son cares about you," she said without preamble. "A lot. He's been alone for 3 years, and I'd made my peace with the possibility that he might stay that way. Not everyone finds love twice. But then he started talking about you, and I heard something in his voice I haven't heard since Sarah died." "We're not," Lena started. "I know what you are and aren't," Margaret interrupted gently. "I'm not trying to push anything. I'm just saying that whatever this is, friendship, family, something more, it's healing him. And Sophie adores you. I haven't seen her attached to someone like this since her mother passed." She paused, her expression turning fierce. "Don't take this the wrong way, but if you're going to be part of their lives, you need to be sure. Because if you leave, it will break them both. And they've been broken enough." The warning was delivered with love, but it was a warning nonetheless. Lena met Margaret's eyes steadily. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. All of this, it's the most stable thing in my life. I would never do anything to hurt them." Margaret studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Then welcome to the family, sweetheart. Such as we are." That night, after Thomas and Margaret had gone to their hotel and Sophie was in bed, Lena and Ethan sat on the couch with mugs of tea, exhausted and content. "Your parents are wonderful," Lena said. "They are. They're also meddling and occasionally overwhelming, but yeah, they're pretty great." Ethan smiled. "My mother cornered you in the kitchen, didn't she? I saw you two talking." "She wanted to make sure I wasn't going to hurt you or Sophie." "That sounds like her, son." Ethan didn't seem bothered. "What did you tell her?" "That I'm not going anywhere." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his gray eyes thoughtful in the dim light of the living room. "Are you sure about that? Because I need you to know you can leave any time. If this gets too complicated or too much, or if you need space, you don't owe us anything." "I know I don't owe you," Lena said, "but I choose this. I choose being here, with you and Sophie, with your parents who adopted me in about 4 hours flat. This is the first time in my life I felt like I actually belong somewhere." "You do belong here," Ethan said quietly. "You have from the start." Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of something that had been building for months. Lena set down her mug carefully. "Ethan, I need to tell you something." "Okay. I don't know what this is, what we are, but it's more than friendship for me. Has been for a while." Her heart was pounding, but she pushed forward. "I understand if you don't feel the same way. I know you're still grieving Sarah. I know the last thing you probably need is complicated feelings from your daughter's friend, but I can't keep pretending I don't feel it." Ethan was silent for long enough that Lena started to panic, mentally preparing her retreat. Then he reached over and took her hand, the gesture deliberate, careful, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't want to. "I feel it too," he said. "Have felt it for months, but I've been terrified to say anything because my life is complicated. I have a daughter. I have baggage. I'm still figuring out how to be a person without Sarah." He paused. "And you're young, and you're just starting to build a life outside your family's control. The last thing I want to do is take advantage of that vulnerability." "You're not taking advantage," Lena said. "I'm an adult making a choice. The first real choice I've made in 22 years that's just for me, not to please someone else or avoid conflict." "Are you sure?" "Ethan, you and Sophie have shown me what family is supposed to feel like, what love is supposed to look like. You've taught me that I deserve kindness and respect and to be chosen, not tolerated. If I'm sure about anything, it's that I want more of that, more of this. With you." Ethan lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, old-fashioned and tender. "Then we take this slow, really slow, because Sophie has to come first, and because I need to make sure I'm ready for this. But yes, I want to try." "Slow is good," Lena agreed, even as her heart raced. "I can do slow."
They sat together on the couch until nearly midnight, just talking and holding hands like teenagers at a first date. When Ethan finally walked her to her car, he kissed her forehead and told her to drive safe. It was chaste and careful, and somehow more meaningful than anything more passionate would have been. Lena drove home feeling lighter than air, hope blooming in her chest like something wild and unstoppable. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing her yet. The confrontation came 2 weeks later, orchestrated by Patricia with the precision of a military campaign. Lena received an email from her father, the first direct communication in nearly 3 months, requesting a family meeting to resolve outstanding issues. The tone was formal, businesslike, the kind Richard Parker used when negotiating contracts. There was no warmth, no apology, just a date, time, and location at the Parker house. Lena's first instinct was to delete it. She had no interest in walking back into that house, into that dynamic, into the carefully constructed narrative where she was the problem that needed fixing. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was Vanessa's apology weeks earlier. Maybe it was the newfound confidence that came from being chosen by people who actually valued her. Maybe she was just tired of running. She called Ethan, needing to talk it through. "My father wants a family meeting," she said without preamble when he answered, "to resolve outstanding issues." "What do you think that means?" "It means your mother has probably been working on damage control for months and has decided it's time to bring you back in line," Ethan said bluntly. "Family meetings in dysfunctional systems are usually about reasserting control, not actual resolution." "That's what I thought." Lena sat down on her bed, suddenly exhausted. "Should I go?" "That's your decision, but if you do go, I think you should have support. Someone who can witness what happens and back you up if things get ugly." He paused. "I could go with you, if you want." "You'd do that?" "Lena, I'd walk through fire for you at this point. Dealing with your terrible parents is considerably less dangerous than fire." Despite everything, Lena found herself smiling. "Okay. Yes, if I'm going to do this, I want you there." "Then I'll be there." The meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. Lena spent the days leading up to it in a state of low-level anxiety, imagining every possible scenario. She told herself repeatedly that she didn't have to prove anything, didn't have to perform or placate or compromise herself to make them comfortable. But 22 years of conditioning was hard to overcome. Saturday arrived cold and gray, the weather matching Lena's mood. Ethan picked her up in the early afternoon, Sophie having been left with Margaret for a special grandmother-granddaughter day. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as they drove toward Riverside Estates. "No," Lena admitted, "but I don't think I ever will be, so we might as well get it over with." The Parker house looked exactly the same, pristine and imposing and utterly unwelcoming. Lena used her key, which still worked, surprised her mother hadn't changed the locks yet. Patricia had probably calculated that making such an obvious rejection would look bad if word got out. Her family was waiting in the formal living room, the one that was never actually used for living, only for impressing guests. Patricia sat in an armchair looking regal and composed. Richard stood by the fireplace in that position men of authority always seemed to adopt. Vanessa was on the couch, looking uncomfortable, Robert beside her with an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. They all looked up when Lena entered, followed by Ethan. Patricia's composure cracked slightly at the sight of him. "I said this was a family meeting," she said coldly. "Ethan is my family," Lena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "More than any of you have ever been. He stays, or I leave." "Lena, don't be dramatic," Richard began. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm stating a boundary. He stays, or this meeting doesn't happen." Her parents exchanged glances, clearly recalculating their strategy. Finally, Patricia gestured stiffly to the couch. "Fine, sit." Lena and Ethan sat together on the opposite couch, presenting a united front. Robert gave Ethan a small nod of recognition. They knew each other from work, though not well. Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear into the upholstery. "We've asked you here," Patricia began, her tone suggesting this was a formal proceeding rather than a family conversation, "because this situation has gone on long enough. Your behavior at Vanessa's wedding was unacceptable. Your subsequent refusal to apologize or even acknowledge the disruption you caused has damaged this family's reputation. Stop, Ethan said quietly, but with enough force that Patricia actually paused. Let's be very clear about what happened at that wedding. You segregated your daughter, hid her behind plants, and treated her like an embarrassment. When a stranger showed her basic human decency, you tried to force her back into hiding. Those are the facts. Everything that came after was a direct result of your cruelty. Patricia's face flushed. How dare you come into my home? And I dare, because someone needs to say this to your face, Ethan continued. You abused your daughter, emotionally, psychologically, systematically for her entire life. And when she finally stood up for herself, you punished her by cutting off support and demanding she apologize for having the audacity to want to be treated like a human being. We did not abuse her, Richard interjected, his voice taking on that reasonable tone that had always made Lena doubt her own reality. We provided for her. We gave her every opportunity. You gave her the bare minimum required by law, Lena said, finding her voice. And you made sure I knew every day that even that was more than I deserved. You treated me like a charity case, like you were doing me a favor by not abandoning me, and you expected me to be grateful. You should be grateful, Patricia snapped, her composure finally breaking completely. Do you know what we sacrificed? The stares, the questions, the pity from everyone who saw us with a deformed child. Don't. Lena's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare call me deformed. I was born without one arm. That's a fact, not a flaw. The only thing deformed in this family is your capacity for love. Vanessa made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Robert's arm went around her shoulders. You've turned this girl against us, Patricia said, glaring at Ethan. You showed up at that wedding like some kind of white knight and poisoned her mind. I opened her eyes, Ethan corrected. There's a difference. She could already see what you were doing. She just hadn't had permission to name it yet. This is exactly why we called this meeting, Richard said, trying to regain control of the conversation. To address these ridiculous accusations and move forward as a family. Lena, your mother and I are willing to let you come back home. We'll even restore your phone service and your allowance. But you need to acknowledge that you overreacted and that we've always had your best interests at heart. The offer hung in the air, a carefully constructed trap. Come back. Submit. Pretend none of this happened. Accept their version of reality where they were the benevolent parents and she was the ungrateful child. No, Lena said simply. No? Patricia repeated, as if she'd never heard the word before. No, I'm not coming back. I'm not apologizing, and I'm not pretending that your abuse was actually love. Lena stood up, Ethan rising beside her. I came here today hoping maybe you'd actually acknowledge what you did, that you'd own your behavior and try to make amends. But you can't. You're too invested in being right, in maintaining your perfect image, to admit that you destroyed your own daughter's childhood. We did not. Yes, you did. The words burst out of Lena with decades of suppressed pain. You made me feel ashamed of existing. You hid me away and told me it was for my own good. You gave Vanessa everything and gave me scraps and expected me to smile and be grateful. You treated me like I was broken and needed fixing instead of like I was your daughter who just needed love. This is absurd, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. You're being manipulated. The only manipulation happening here is yours, Ethan said, and it's not working anymore. Lena has people in her life now who actually value her, who see her for who she is and love her because of it, not despite it. You had 22 years to be those people. You failed. Get out, Patricia hissed. Both of you, get out of my house. Gladly, Lena said. She looked at Vanessa, who was crying quietly. If you really meant what you said at the coffee shop, if you really want to change, you know where to find me. But I'm done waiting for this family to love me. I'm done begging for basic respect. She turned and walked out, Ethan right beside her. Behind them, she heard Robert's voice saying something to her parents, his tone angry, and Vanessa's sobs growing louder. But she didn't look back, didn't stop, didn't let herself feel anything except the overwhelming relief of finally walking away. They made it to Ethan's car before Lena's composure shattered. She bent double, hands on her knees, trying to breathe through the panic and grief and exhausted triumph. You did it, Ethan said quietly, his hand warm on her back. You stood up to them. You told the truth. You were so brave. I don't feel brave, Lena gasped. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. Adrenaline crash. He guided her into the passenger seat, buckled her in like she was something precious. Just breathe. I've got you. He drove them back to his house, where Margaret met them at the door with Sophie, both of them taking one look at Lena's face and immediately shifting into comfort mode. Margaret made tea. Sophie brought her favorite stuffed dragon. Ethan just sat beside her on the couch, solid and steady, his presence an anchor. Did your other family hurt you? Sophie asked bluntly, crawling into Lena's lap with the fearless affection of children. Yes, Lena said, because Sophie deserved honesty. They hurt me a lot, for a very long time. Are you going to go back? No, never. Good, Sophie nodded firmly. You should stay with us. We're your family now, right, Daddy? Ethan met Lena's eyes over his daughter's head. Right, he said softly. We're your family now. And Lena, holding this child who'd claimed her without hesitation, sitting beside this man who'd shown her what love looked like, surrounded by the warmth of people who'd chosen her freely and completely, finally let herself believe it might be true. The weeks following the confrontation passed in a strange blur of grief and relief. Lena mourned the family she'd never really had while simultaneously celebrating her freedom from their toxicity. Some days she felt lighter than air, untethered from 22 years of shame and inadequacy. Other days, the weight of being truly alone in the world pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. Ethan and Sophie became her touchstones during those unsteady weeks. She found herself at their house more nights than not, helping with dinner or homework, reading bedtime stories to Sophie, talking with Ethan late into the evening about everything and nothing. The boundaries between friendship and something more blurred incrementally, neither of them rushing but both moving steadily toward a future that felt inevitable. You basically live here now, Sophie observed one December evening. They were decorating the Christmas tree, Sophie insisting that every ornament needed its own special place and detailed justification. You have a toothbrush in our bathroom, and pajamas in the guest room, and your shoes are by the door with ours. Is that okay? Lena asked, suddenly self-conscious. Maybe she'd overstayed her welcome, become the burden her family had always accused her of being. It's good, Sophie said firmly. I like when you're here. The house feels happier. She hung a glittery reindeer ornament with great ceremony. Daddy smiles more when you're around. He used to smile less after Mommy died, but now he smiles the way he used to in the old pictures. From across the room, Ethan met Lena's eyes with an expression that made her heart skip. He'd been sorting through boxes of ornaments, but had clearly been listening to their conversation. Sophie's right, he said quietly. You make this house feel like a home again. If you want to be here, we want you here. As much as you want, for as long as you want. What if I want to be here all the time? The words escaped before Lena could think better of them. What if I want to stop pretending I have somewhere else to go back to? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Ethan set down the ornament box and crossed the room, taking Lena's hand with the careful gentleness that had become familiar. Then stop pretending, he said simply. Move in, officially, not as a guest, but as part of this family. You can't just... Lena's throat tightened. Ethan, we've only been actually dating for 3 weeks. People don't move in together after 3 weeks. People in normal circumstances don't, Ethan agreed. But nothing about our situation is normal. You're here almost every night anyway. Sophie already thinks of you as family. And He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I love you. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I love Sarah from the moment I met her, and I know what this feeling is. So if you need time to figure out your own feelings, that's fine. Take all the time you need. But don't stay away because you think it's too soon or too fast or not proper. Stay away only if you don't want to be here. Sophie abandoned the tree decorating entirely and wrapped her arms around both their legs in what had become her signature group hug. Please stay, she said into the fabric of Lena's jeans. Please, please, please. I'll share my room if you need space, and I promise to be really quiet in the morning so you can sleep. Lena looked down at this child who'd claimed her so completely, then up at this man who'd shown her what it meant to be chosen, and felt something inside her chest crack open with possibility. I love you too, she said to Ethan, the words feeling both enormous and simple. Both of you, this whole weird, wonderful, unexpected family. And yes, I want to stay.
Sophie's cheer of triumph was loud enough to probably disturb the neighbors. Ethan pulled Lena close and kissed her properly for the first time, tender and careful and full of promise. When they broke apart, Sophie was beaming at them with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just successfully completed a complicated mission. Now we can get Lena her own ornament for the tree, she announced, because she's family and family gets ornaments. Can we go shopping tomorrow? Please. We can go shopping tomorrow, Ethan agreed, laughing. But first we need to finish decorating with the ornaments we already have. They finished the tree as the winter darkness settled outside, the three of them working together with the easy cooperation that comes from genuine affection. Lena hung a delicate glass snowflake near a spot where Sarah's photo ornament already resided, a beautiful woman smiling out from a circular frame. She felt no jealousy or competition with this ghost.
Sarah had loved these people fiercely and had died far too young. The least Lena could do was honor that love by caring for the family Sarah had left behind. Moving in took less than a day because Lena owned so little. Her landlord was happy to cancel the lease early. He had a waiting list for the unit. Maya helped her pack, asking no questions but offering quiet support, and a hug that lasted several minutes. "You look happy," Maya said as they loaded the last box into Ethan's car. "Really happy. Like something in you that was always wound tight finally relaxed." "I am happy," Lena realized. "Is that weird? My family disowned me 3 months ago and I'm happy about it." "It's not weird at all," Maya said firmly. "Sometimes the best thing that can happen is getting free of people who hurt you, even if they're family, especially if they're family." Lena's new room at Ethan's house, their house now, she supposed, had been Sarah's home office. Ethan and Sophie had cleaned it out together, both of them crying as they boxed up papers and books and the physical remnants of a life cut short. They'd offered Lena the master bedroom, suggesting Ethan take the office, but she'd refused. That room belonged to Ethan and his memories. She didn't need to erase Sarah to make space for herself. Instead, they painted the office a warm cream color. Margaret donated a bed frame from their storage unit in Oregon. Sophie insisted on helping decorate, which meant the room ended up with considerably more purple accents than Lena had planned, but also felt immediately loved and lived in. On the bookshelf beside Lena's textbooks and childhood favorites sat a framed photo from Thanksgiving. Lena, Ethan, Sophie, Margaret, and Thomas, all crowded around the table, laughing at something Thomas had said. Her first real family photo. Christmas came with a joy Lena had never experienced. She and Sophie spent hours making cookies with Margaret, who'd extended her visit through the holidays. They drove around looking at lights. They watched every Christmas movie Sophie could think of, even the ones with questionable plots and animation that hadn't aged well. On Christmas morning, Lena woke to Sophie jumping on her bed at 6 a.m., shrieking that Santa had come and they had to open presents right now. Under the tree, among the gifts for Sophie and the practical items Ethan had gotten for himself, were several packages with Lena's name. Margaret had knitted her a scarf. Thomas had gotten her a gift card to the bookstore where she worked, with a note saying she should pick out something frivolous. Sophie's gift was a drawing, Lena, Ethan, and Sophie holding hands with "Our Family," written in careful 7-year-old letters across the top. Ethan's gift was last, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a delicate necklace, a silver chain with a small pendant in the shape of a heart. Simple, elegant, clearly chosen with care. "There's an inscription," Ethan said quietly as Lena examined it. "On the back." Lena flipped the pendant over and read the words engraved there. "You were always worth choosing." She didn't even try to stop the tears. Ethan pulled her close while Sophie patted her arm with the solemn concern of a child who understood that sometimes grown-ups cried for good reasons. "It's perfect," Lena managed. "You're perfect. All of this is perfect." "We're not perfect," Ethan corrected gently. "But we're real. And we're yours." The spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. Lena threw herself into her final undergraduate courses, determined to graduate with honors despite the chaos of her personal life. Her internship at the youth center expanded into a part-time job with actual pay and benefits. She started working with a girl named Destiny, 13 years old, missing from the foster system, living with her grandmother who barely spoke English and struggled to navigate social services. Destiny was angry and brilliant and deeply traumatized. She reminded Lena of herself, sharp edges and carefully maintained walls, certain that letting anyone in would only lead to more pain. But Lena was patient, showing up week after week, proving through consistency and genuine care that some adults could be trusted. "Why do you even care?" Destiny demanded one afternoon when Lena helped her fill out paperwork for a school program. "You get paid whether I succeed or not. You don't have to actually give a shit." "You're right," Lena agreed. "I don't have to. I choose to. There's a difference." "Why?" "Because someone chose to care about me when they didn't have to," Lena said honestly. "And it changed my entire life. I want to pay that forward." Destiny studied her for a long moment, her young face old beyond her years. "What happened to you? That made you need someone to care?" Lena considered deflecting, maintaining professional boundaries, keeping her personal trauma private. But something in Destiny's expression, desperate curiosity mixed with fragile hope, made her tell the truth. "My family treated me like I was broken," she said quietly. "I was born missing an arm, and instead of loving me as I was, they spent my entire childhood making me feel ashamed. They hid me away, gave me scraps of affection, made me believe I wasn't worth loving." Destiny's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I believed them for a long time. And then I met someone who refused to accept their version of reality. Someone who saw me and said, 'You deserve better than this.' And he was right. I did deserve better. So I left." "Just like that?" "Not just like that," Lena corrected. "It took courage I didn't know I had, and support from people who chose to love me. But yes, I left. And now I have a real family. People who chose me because they wanted to, not because they felt obligated to." Destiny was quiet for a while, processing this information. Then, so quietly Lena almost missed it, she said, "I wish someone would choose me like that." "I'm choosing you right now," Lena said. "That's what this is. Me showing up, helping you, believing in you even when you don't believe in yourself. That's what choosing someone looks like." Something shifted in Destiny's expression, walls beginning to crack, hope beginning to creep through. It would take time, Lena knew. Trust wasn't built in a single conversation. But this was a start. She told Ethan about the interaction that evening while they cooked dinner together. Sophie was at a friend's house for a play date, giving them rare time alone. "You're good at this," Ethan said, chopping vegetables with the methodical precision he brought to all tasks, working with kids, seeing what they need, and providing it without being patronizing. "I learned from the best," Lena said, stealing a piece of pepper from his cutting board. "You and Sarah both, in different ways. She through you and Sophie, the legacies she left behind. You through every single interaction we've had." Ethan set down his knife and pulled her close, vegetable prep forgotten. "I'm proud of you, I don't say that enough. But watching you build this life, help these kids, become the person you were always meant to be, it's remarkable. I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have," Ethan said firmly. "You're the one who walked away from your family. You're the one putting yourself through school. You're the one showing up for kids like Destiny. I'm just the guy who got lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." "You're the guy who refused to look away," Lena corrected. "That's not luck. That's character." They kissed in the kitchen, dinner temporarily abandoned, lost in each other until the timer on the oven startled them apart. It was domestic and comfortable, and everything Lena had never let herself dream of having. That comfort was shattered 2 weeks later when Vanessa showed up at the youth center. Lena was in the middle of a session with Destiny when the receptionist knocked on the door. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here asking for you. Says she's your sister?" Lena's stomach dropped. She glanced at Destiny, who'd immediately tensed at the interruption, her walls slamming back into place. "Can you give me 5 minutes?" Lena asked the receptionist. Then to Destiny, "I'm sorry, this is unexpected, but I promise I'll be back, and we'll finish this conversation, okay?"
Destiny shrugged with studied indifference, but Lena could see the hurt beneath it. Another adult putting something else ahead of her. Another small abandonment. I mean it, Lena said firmly.
5 minutes? Then I'm back. You can time me if you want. She found Vanessa in the small waiting area, looking out of place in her designer clothes and perfect makeup. Her sister had lost weight since the wedding, Lena noticed. There were shadows under her eyes that concealer couldn't quite hide. What are you doing here? Lena asked, keeping her voice low. How did you even know where I work? I asked around, Vanessa said, called your school, said I was trying to get in touch. They gave me this address. She twisted her hands together nervously. I'm sorry for just showing up, but you weren't answering my texts and I needed to talk to you. I've been busy, Lena said, which was true but also an excuse. She'd been avoiding Vanessa's periodic messages, uncertain whether her sister's claimed transformation was genuine or just another manipulation. I know, I'm not trying to guilt you. Vanessa took a shaky breath. Robert and I are separating, officially. The divorce will be final in a few months. Despite everything, Lena felt a pang of sympathy. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's my fault. I waited too long to change, worked too slowly on myself. By the time I actually started addressing my issues, he'd already checked out emotionally. Vanessa's smile was bitter. Turns out you can't participate in abuse for 22 years and then expect people to just forgive you because you finally feel bad about it. Vanessa, I'm not here for pity, Vanessa interrupted, or to ask you to fix my marriage. That's done. I'm here because I've been in therapy for 4 months now, and my therapist suggested I might benefit from making amends. Real amends. Not the fake apology I gave you at the coffee shop where I was still making it about me and my problems. Lena glanced back toward her office, where Destiny was waiting. I'm in the middle of a session. I can't do this right now. I know. I'm sorry. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. I wrote you a letter. Everything I should have said years ago. Everything I'm learning about myself and what I participated in. You don't have to read it. You don't have to forgive me. But I needed to try to make things right, even if it's 20 years too late. Lena took the envelope reluctantly. Vanessa, I don't know what you want from me. Nothing, Vanessa said, and her voice cracked. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. What Mom and Dad did. What I did. The damage we caused. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Before Lena could respond, Vanessa was gone, walking quickly out of the youth center and disappearing into the parking lot. Lena stood holding the envelope, feeling ambushed and unsettled. She shoved the letter into her bag and went back to Destiny, who was slumped in her chair with her arms crossed defensively. 6.5 minutes, Destiny said accusingly. What?
You said 5. You're right, I'm sorry, that was disrespectful of your time. Lena sat down and gave Destiny her full attention. Where were we? Destiny studied her suspiciously. Who was that lady? My biological sister. We're not close. She looked upset. She was. She wanted to apologize for things that happened a long time ago. Are you going to forgive her? The question was loaded with more than curiosity. Destiny was testing whether forgiveness was possible, whether people who'd hurt you could change. I don't know yet, Lena answered honestly. She hurt me for a very long time. An apology doesn't erase that damage, but it's a start. Sometimes that's all people can offer, a start. Whether that's enough is something only the person who was hurt can decide. Destiny absorbed this carefully. My mom wants to see me again. She's been clean for 6 months. Grandma says I should give her another chance. What do you want? I don't know. Destiny's voice was small, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed. I'm scared she'll hurt me again, but I'm also scared that if I don't try, I'll regret it forever. Both of those fears are valid, Lena said gently, and there's no right answer. You get to protect yourself. You also get to take calculated risks if you choose to, but whatever you decide, I'll support you. They talked for another 30 minutes, unpacking Destiny's complicated feelings about her mother, about trust, about the terror and hope that came with the possibility of reconciliation. When the session ended, Destiny left looking slightly less burdened, and Lena felt the satisfaction that came from doing meaningful work. She didn't read Vanessa's letter until that night, after Sophie was asleep and she and Ethan were curled up on the couch. She pulled out the envelope and Ethan immediately sat up straighter. "What's that?" "Letter from Vanessa. She showed up at work today."
Lena turned the envelope over in her hands. "She's divorcing Robert. Says she's been in therapy and wants to make amends."
"Do you want to read it?" "I don't know. Part of me does. Part of me wants to throw it away and never think about my biological family again." "Both valid responses," Ethan said, echoing her words to Destiny earlier. "What does your gut say?" Lena thought about it, really examined her feelings beneath the knee-jerk defensiveness. "My gut says I should read it, not because I owe her anything, but because I want to know if she's actually changing or if this is more manipulation." "Then read it. I'll be right here." Lena opened the envelope and pulled out several pages of handwritten text. Vanessa's handwriting was neat and precise, just like everything else about her. She took a breath and began to read. The letter was raw in a way Vanessa had never been, full of acknowledgments of specific cruelties, moments Lena had thought no one else remembered or cared about. The 10th birthday party where Lena's friends were uninvited. The family photos where Vanessa had deliberately stood in front of Lena to block her from view. The time in high school when Vanessa had accidentally spilled juice on Lena's dress right before a school dance because she didn't want her sister looking too nice. Vanessa detailed it all, each memory a small knife of recognition. She wrote about learning in therapy that she'd been conditioned to see Lena as competition, that their mother had actively fostered resentment between them by praising Vanessa while criticizing Lena. She wrote about how she'd internalized the idea that love was scarce, that if Lena received attention or affection, it somehow meant less for her. The letter continued, "I know now that's not how love works. Love isn't a finite resource that runs out if you share it. But that's what Mom taught us. And I believed her because it benefited me to believe her. I was the favorite, so I never questioned the system. I'm ashamed that it took losing my marriage to make me see what I'd been participating in. I'm ashamed that I was so weak and selfish that I chose comfort over standing up for my own sister. You deserved a family who loved you unconditionally. You deserved a sister who protected you instead of joining in the cruelty. I'm sorry I wasn't that person. I'm trying to become her now, but I know it's too late to give you the childhood you should have had. All I can do is promise to do better going forward, whether you're part of my life or not." The letter ended with contact information and an invitation to coffee if Lena ever felt ready, but with explicit acknowledgement that Vanessa didn't expect forgiveness and would respect whatever boundaries Lena needed. Lena set down the pages and found her cheeks wet. Ethan pulled her close without comment, letting her cry against his shoulder. "She remembers," Lena said when she could speak. "She remembers all of it, every small cruelty, and she's finally admitting it was cruel instead of pretending it was normal. How does that make you feel?" "Validated," Lena said slowly, testing the word. "And also angry. Because if she could see it clearly enough to write it all down now, she could have seen it then. She chose not to. She chose the easier path." "Yes," Ethan agreed, "and that's fair to be angry about. You can acknowledge that she's making progress while still being angry about the damage she caused." "Can I forgive her and still be angry?" "Absolutely. Forgiveness isn't about erasing your anger or pretending the hurt didn't happen. It's about deciding whether someone's genuine efforts to change deserve a chance. But it's also your choice. You don't owe her forgiveness just because she's finally doing the work she should have done decades ago." Lena read the letter again over the following days, each time finding new layers of meaning and recognition. She thought about destiny, about second chances, about the complicated math of deciding when someone had earned the right to try again. And slowly, carefully, she began to draft a response. She didn't send it for 3 weeks. She showed it to Ethan, to Margaret when she called for their weekly video chat, even to her faculty advisor who'd become something of a mentor. Everyone said the same thing: trust yourself, follow your instincts, remember that you get to decide what reconciliation looks like if it happens at all. Finally, on a Tuesday evening in late March, Lena sent the email. It was shorter than Vanessa's letter, more guarded, but honest. She acknowledged the apology and said she believed Vanessa was sincere. She also explained that rebuilding trust would take time, that she needed to see sustained change before considering real reconciliation. She offered limited contact, maybe coffee once a month to start,
with clear boundaries about topics and timing. Vanessa's response came within an hour. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I'll prove I deserve it." They met for coffee 2 weeks later at a neutral location neither of them associated with family history. It was awkward at first, both of them hyper-aware of the weight of everything unspoken between them. But Vanessa didn't make excuses or try to minimize the past. She asked about Lena's life with genuine curiosity, her work, her studies, her relationship with Ethan and Sophie. "You look happy," Vanessa said. "Really happy. I don't think I've ever seen you look like that." "I am happy," Lena confirmed. "I have a family who actually wants me. It's revolutionary." "I'm glad." Vanessa's voice was thick with emotion. "You deserve that. You always deserved that." They talked for an hour, carefully navigating around the most painful topics, building something small and tentative that might someday become a real relationship. When they parted ways, Vanessa hugged her, brief and awkward, but genuine. "Same time next month?" Vanessa asked hopefully. "Same time next month," Lena agreed. She drove home, to Ethan's house, to their house, to the place where she belonged, feeling lighter than she had in months. Sophie met her at the door with her usual enthusiasm, demanding to know if Lena would help her with a school project about families. "What's the project?" Lena asked, hanging up her coat. "We have to draw our family tree and talk about what makes our family special." Sophie pulled out a large piece of poster board already covered in markers and glue. "I put you on it, right here, next to Daddy, because you're part of our family now." Lena looked at the family tree, crude but heartfelt, showing Sophie in the middle with branches extending to Ethan, to Lena, to Margaret and Thomas, even to Sarah with a small note that said, "Mommy, who's in heaven." It was comprehensive and inclusive and absolutely perfect. "What makes our family special?" Lena read from the assignment sheet. "That's easy," Sophie said. "We choose each other. Mrs. Patterson says most families are about who you're born to, but our family is about who we want to keep." Ethan appeared in the doorway, smiling at them both. Sophie's teacher might have questions about that interpretation. "It's true, though," Sophie insisted. "You said it yourself, Daddy. You said Lena became family because we chose her and she chose us back, and that's more important than sharing blood." "Your daddy is very wise," Lena said, meeting Ethan's eyes across the room. That night, after Sophie was asleep and they were alone in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, they'd officially combined rooms 2 weeks ago, a shift that felt both momentous and natural. Ethan pulled Lena close. "I want to ask you something," he said, "but I need you to know there's no pressure, no expectation, no timeline." "That's a terrifying preamble." "Sorry," he laughed softly. "I'm trying to be respectful of your autonomy and probably overthinking it. What I want to say is, I want to marry you. Not today, not even necessarily soon, but someday. When you're ready. If you're ready. I want Sophie to grow up knowing you're permanent. I want to build a life with you that's legally and spiritually and every other way permanent." Lena's heart was racing. "You want to marry me?" "I do, but I know you're still healing from your family trauma. I know you're young and still figuring out who you are. I know we've only been officially together for a few months, even though it feels like longer. So I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just telling you my intentions, so you know where I stand." "And where do you stand?" "Completely, irrevocably in love with you," Ethan said simply. "Ready to commit for the long term whenever you're ready to have me." Lena kissed him then, putting into the gesture everything she felt but struggled to articulate: gratitude and love and trust and the fierce joy of being chosen. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said, "when I've graduated and figured out my next steps, when I've proven to myself that I can build a stable life independent of anyone's support, when I know for certain that I'm choosing this because it's what I want, not because I'm afraid of being alone." 6 months, Ethan agreed. "I can wait 6 months. I'd wait years if that's what you needed." "I won't make you wait years," Lena promised. "But I need to do this right. For me. For Sophie. For us." "I understand." They fell asleep tangled together, secure in their love, even as Lena insisted on time to solidify her own identity. It was the healthiest kind of relationship, one where both people could be honest about their needs without fear of abandonment.
Graduation came in May with all the ceremony and celebration Lena had never imagined she'd have. Ethan took the day off work. Sophie wore her purple dress and carried a sign that said, "Lena is the best," in glittery letters. Margaret and Thomas flew in from Oregon. Even Maya was there, cheering from the audience as Lena walked across the stage to accept her diploma. Vanessa had asked if she could come. Lena had hesitated, then agreed, curious to see if her sister would actually show up. She did, sitting in the back, not trying to insert herself into the celebrations, but present nonetheless. When their eyes met across the crowd, Vanessa smiled, tentative but genuine, and mouthed, "Congratulations." It was a small moment, but it mattered. After the ceremony, they all went to dinner at Sophie's favorite restaurant, the kind of casual family establishment with crayons on the table and a kids' menu featuring items in the shapes of dinosaurs. It was loud and chaotic and perfect. Margaret insisted on paying, giving a toast about how proud she was of her newest daughter, and how Sarah would have loved Lena if she'd been here to meet her. That night, back at home with Sophie asleep and the house quiet, Lena stood in front of the bathroom mirror examining her reflection. 23 years old, college graduate, child advocate, girlfriend, surrogate mother to a 7-year-old, member of a family who'd chosen her completely and without reservation. The woman in the mirror looked nothing like the girl who'd sat alone behind a decorative palm 6 months ago. That girl had been broken down, convinced of her own worthlessness, hiding from a family who'd taught her she was shameful. This woman stood tall. This woman knew her value. This woman had people who loved her not despite her perceived flaws, but as a complete, complex person worthy of affection. She thought about Ethan's question, his declaration of intent to marry her. 6 months, she'd said. Give me 6 months to be sure. But standing there, looking at herself and seeing someone finally whole, Lena realized she didn't need 6 months. She already knew, had known for a while if she was honest with herself. She was just scared that saying it out loud would somehow break the spell, reveal this happiness as the temporary illusion she'd always believed it had to be. But it wasn't an illusion. It was real. Hard-won and precious and absolutely real. Ethan appeared in the doorway, drawn by some sixth sense that she needed him. "You okay?" "More than okay," Lena said. "I've been thinking about what you said. About marriage. About commitment." And? His voice was carefully neutral, giving her space to say whatever she needed. "And I don't want to wait 6 months." Lena turned to face him fully. "I love you. I love Sophie. I love this life we're building, and I don't need more time to be sure. I'm already sure." "Lena, ask me," she interrupted. "Ask me properly. I'm ready." Ethan searched her face, looking for doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he took her hand, the gesture that had become their foundation, the first connection made in a ballroom full of people who'd looked away. "Lena Parker," he said quietly, "will you marry me? Will you legally, permanently, irrevocably become part of this family? Will you be Sophie's mother and my wife and let us love you for the rest of your life?" "Yes," Lena said, and felt the word resonate through her entire body like a bell ringing. Yes to all of it, to forever, to family, to choosing and being chosen. Yes. He kissed her then, deep and passionate and full of promise. And Lena kissed him back, this man who'd refused to look away when everyone else had, who'd seen her isolation and decided it was unacceptable, who'd loved her back into being a person who could believe she deserved good things. Somewhere in the house, Sophie stirred in her sleep, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-olds dreamed. Tomorrow they'd tell her the news, and she'd probably scream with joy and immediately start planning what color dress she'd wear. Tomorrow they'd call Margaret and Thomas and start thinking about timelines and logistics. Tomorrow the real work of building a marriage would begin. But tonight, Lena stood in the home she'd helped create and felt nothing but gratitude for the stranger who'd crossed a ballroom and said 6 simple words that changed everything. Act like you're with me. She had. And in acting, it had become truth. She was with them. They were with her. And for the first time in 23 years, Lena Parker knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Sophie's reaction to the engagement news exceeded even their most optimistic predictions. She'd been eating breakfast when they told her the next morning,
and the shriek of pure joy that erupted from her 7-year-old lungs probably woke half the neighborhood. She launched herself at Lena with such force that they both nearly toppled over, cereal forgotten, as Sophie wrapped her arms around Lena's waist and refused to let go. "You're going to be my real mom?" Sophie asked, her voice muffled against Lena's shirt. "Like, officially? Forever?" "Officially forever," Lena confirmed, her throat tight with emotion. "If that's okay with you." Sophie pulled back just enough to look up at Lena with an expression of such fierce determination that it was almost comical on her small face. "It's more than okay. It's the best thing ever. Better than Christmas. Better than my birthday. Better than when Daddy said we could get a puppy someday." "We never said you could get a puppy," Ethan interjected, laughing. "You said someday maybe if I was really responsible," Sophie corrected, without taking her eyes off Lena. "And that's basically a promise. But this is better than even that. Can I tell everyone at school? Can I call Grandma and Grandpa right now? Can we have a big wedding with a purple dress for me?" "Yes to calling your grandparents. We'll figure out the school thing. And absolutely yes to a purple dress," Lena said. "In fact, I was hoping you'd help me plan the whole wedding. Since you're going to be my daughter, you should get a say in how we celebrate." The word daughter landed with visible impact. Sophie's eyes went wide and shiny with tears that she blinked away rapidly, trying to maintain her composure. "Your daughter," she repeated, testing the words. "I'll be your daughter, and you'll be my mom, and we'll be a real family." "We're already a real family," Ethan said gently. "The wedding just makes it official for everyone else." They spent the morning making calls, to Margaret and Thomas first, who were predictably overjoyed and immediately started planning to come back for the wedding, to Ethan's sister in Seattle, who screamed almost as loudly as Sophie had and demanded to be part of the wedding party, to Lena's advisor at school, who'd become a mentor and friend, to Maya, who cried happy tears and said she'd always known this would happen. Lena hesitated before making the next call, her finger hovering over Vanessa's number. They'd been meeting monthly for coffee, slowly building something that might eventually become a sisterly relationship. But this felt different. This was inviting Vanessa into a major life event, giving her access to Lena's joy in a way that felt vulnerable and risky. "You don't have to tell her," Ethan said quietly, reading her hesitation. "Not yet. Not until you're ready." "No, I want to," Lena said, surprising herself with the realization that it was true. She's been showing up consistently for 4 months. She's doing the work. And this is what reconciliation looks like, letting people back in incrementally, testing whether they can handle being trusted with the important things. She made the call. Vanessa answered on the second ring, and Lena could hear the nervousness in her sister's voice, the fear that Lena was calling to cancel their next coffee date, to revoke the tentative forgiveness that had been extended. "I'm getting married," Lena said without preamble. "To Ethan, the man from the wedding. We're engaged." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Vanessa's voice came through, shaky but genuine. "Lena, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. When's the wedding?" "We're thinking late summer. Small ceremony, just close friends and family." Lena took a breath. "I wanted you to know. I'm not sure yet if I'm ready to have you at the wedding itself, but I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through some other channel." "Thank you," Vanessa said, and Lena could hear she was crying. "Thank you for telling me, and for even considering whether I could be there. I know I don't deserve—" "Don't," Lena interrupted gently. "Don't do the self-flagellation thing. Just be happy for me. That's all I need right now." "I am happy for you," Vanessa said. "Truly. You deserve every bit of happiness in the world. And Ethan seems like a good man. His daughter is lucky to get you as a mother." After they hung up, Lena sat for a moment with the phone in her hand, processing the conversation. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined speaking to Vanessa with anything approaching normalcy. Now, while their relationship was still fragile and incomplete, it was at least moving in a direction that felt healthy rather than toxic. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked. "Hopeful," Lena said. "No." Which is weird and scary and also kind of wonderful. The wedding planning consumed the next few months in the best possible way. Sophie threw herself into the project with the enthusiasm of a child who'd finally been given important adult responsibilities. She had opinions about everything. The venue should have a garden for photos, the cake should have at least 3 different flavors because people have different preferences, and absolutely everyone should be allowed to wear purple if they wanted to. They chose a small botanical garden for the ceremony, a place that felt intimate and beautiful without the oppressive formality of a traditional wedding venue. Margaret flew in early to help with preparations, and somewhere along the way, she and Sophie decided they should make the wedding favors themselves. Small potted succulents with handwritten tags that said, "Love grows here." Lena's work at the youth center had expanded. She'd been promoted to a full-time position as a child advocate, working primarily with kids aging out of foster care or dealing with family trauma. Destiny had become one of her success stories. Reunited with her mother under careful supervision, doing well in school, talking about college applications even though she was only a freshman. The girl still had hard days, still struggled with trust, but she was thriving in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. "You're coming to my wedding, right?" Lena asked during one of their sessions. "I know it's not required, but I'd really like you to be there." Destiny looked up from the college brochure they'd been reviewing, surprise evident on her face. "Really? You want me at your wedding? Of course I do. You're important to me. This work, what we do here, it's not just a job. You're not just a case file. You're a person I care about, and I want people I care about at my wedding." I don't have anything nice to wear, Destiny said, which was teenager code for, "I want to come, but I'm scared I won't fit in." "We'll figure that out," Lena said firmly. "Margaret is an excellent shopper, and she loves any excuse to take someone dress shopping. Between her and Sophie, you'll be perfectly outfitted. Say yes." "Okay," Destiny said, a smile breaking through her usual guarded expression. "Yeah, I'll come." 3 weeks before the wedding, Lena received an unexpected letter. Not email, not text, but an actual physical letter addressed in handwriting she recognized immediately, her mother's precise, elegant script. She stared at the envelope for a full minute before opening it, her heart pounding with a complicated mixture of dread and curiosity. The letter was shorter than Vanessa's had been, but no less significant. Patricia's words were careful, calculated, nothing like the raw honesty Vanessa had managed. But beneath the formal language, Lena could detect something that might have been genuine regret. "Your father and I have become aware of your upcoming marriage," the letter began. "Vanessa informed us as we are no longer in direct contact with you due to the unfortunate events of last year. We want you to know that we wish you well in this new chapter of your life. We recognize that our relationship with you has been strained, and we bear some responsibility for that. If you would be willing to meet with us before the wedding, we would like the opportunity to speak with you. Not to ask for an invitation or to insert ourselves where we are not wanted, but simply to offer our congratulations in person and perhaps begin to repair some of the damage that has been done. Your father and I are seeing a marriage counselor who has suggested that family therapy might be beneficial. We would like you to be part of that process, if you're open to it. Regardless of your decision, please know that we are proud of the woman you have become, even if we failed to show you that support when it mattered most." The letter was signed by both parents, their signatures side by side in a way that suggested this was a unified effort rather than Patricia acting alone. Lena read it 3 times, each time finding new layers of meaning and manipulation and possibly genuine remorse. It was impossible to tell which elements were authentic and which were performance. But that, she was learning, was often the case with people attempting to change after years of toxic patterns. The first steps were always awkward, always suspect, always required a leap of faith from the person who'd been hurt. She showed the letter to Ethan that evening. He read it carefully, his expression thoughtful. "What do you think?" she asked. "I think it's carefully worded to seem apologetic without actually taking full responsibility," Ethan said bluntly. "The phrase 'we bear some responsibility' is very different from 'we were wrong and we hurt you.' And framing your estrangement as unfortunate events, rather than the direct result of our abusive behavior, is a pretty significant minimization. So you think it's not genuine?" "I think it might be the beginning of genuine," Ethan corrected. "People who've spent decades in toxic patterns don't usually wake up one day with perfect insight and accountability. It's a process. This reads like someone who's started that process but has a long way to go." He handed the letter back to her. "The question isn't whether their apology is perfect. It's whether you have the emotional bandwidth to engage with their imperfect attempt at reconciliation. Lena thought about it for several days, turning the question over in her mind from every angle. She thought about destiny, about second chances, about the difference between enabling abuse and allowing space for growth. She thought about Sophie's family tree project, about how she'd drawn branches extending to Lena's biological family, even though Lena had never mentioned them, because Sophie believed that family was complicated and messy, and sometimes people who hurt you could still be part of your tree if you wanted them there. Finally, she drafted a response. Not an email, but a letter of her own, matching her mother's formality with deliberate intention. "Thank you for your letter and your well wishes regarding my marriage," she wrote. "I appreciate that you and Dad are seeking counseling, and I think that's a positive step. However, I'm not ready for family therapy or in-person meetings at this time. I need to see sustained change over an extended period before I'm willing to invest emotional energy in repairing our relationship. What I will offer is this. I'll keep in touch through occasional emails or letters. You can send updates about your therapy process, and I'll respond when I'm able. If, after 6 months or a year of consistent effort on your part, I feel that family therapy might be productive, we can revisit that conversation. But right now, my focus is on building my life with Ethan and Sophie, and I need to protect that space from potential toxicity. I hope you can understand and respect these boundaries." She signed it simply, Lena, and mailed it before she could second-guess herself. Whatever happened next was up to her parents. She'd extended a thread of possibility, thin and tentative, but real. Whether they could build something from it remained to be seen. The wedding day arrived with perfect late summer weather, warm but not sweltering, with a gentle breeze that made the flowers in the botanical garden dance. Lena woke early in the guest room at Margaret and Thomas's hotel suite, where she'd spent the night according to Sophie's insistence that the bride and groom shouldn't see each other before the ceremony because that's how it works in movies. Margaret helped her dress, her gentle hands steady as she fastened the simple white gown Lena had chosen, elegant but not fussy, with one sleeve and a flowing skirt that moved like water. It wasn't a traditional wedding dress, but then nothing about this wedding was traditional. Maya was her maid of honor, standing beside her in a soft blue dress that complemented rather than matched. Destiny was there too, looking uncomfortable but determined in a purple dress that Sophie had helped pick out, insisting that anyone important to Lena should be wearing purple. Vanessa had been invited after all, a decision Lena had made 2 weeks before the wedding. Not as a bridesmaid, not in any position of prominence, but as a guest who'd earned the right to witness this moment through months of consistent effort and genuine change. She'd cried when Lena called to extend the invitation, promising not to make the day about herself, promising just to be there as support. Sophie was the flower girl naturally, wearing a dress that was more purple than any dress had a right to be and loving every second of it. She took her role with utmost seriousness, practicing her walk down the aisle approximately 40 times in the days leading up to the wedding and instructing everyone on proper ceremony behavior. "Remember," she told Lena solemnly before the ceremony began, "you have to walk slow, like this." She demonstrated an exaggerated slow-motion walk. "Because if you walk fast, people don't get to see how pretty you look. And you look really, really pretty." "Thank you, sweetheart," Lena said, crouching down to Sophie's level. "You look beautiful, too. Are you ready for this? For me to officially become your mom?" "I've been ready forever," Sophie said seriously. "Since the first time you came to our house, and you weren't scared of me even though I talked too much. Daddy says I talk too much sometimes, but you never make me feel bad about it." You don't talk too much," Lena assured her. "You have a lot of important things to say, and I love hearing all of them." The ceremony was small, maybe 40 people total, everyone who truly mattered. Margaret and Thomas sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Ethan's sister had flown in from Seattle with her family. Work colleagues from the youth center. Sophie's teacher, who'd become something of a friend. Maya and her partner. Destiny and her mother sitting together. And yes, Vanessa, in the back row, crying quietly into a tissue, but otherwise keeping her promise to not center herself. The officiant was a family friend of Ethan's, someone who'd known Sarah and had watched him navigate grief with compassion and grace. When Lena walked down the aisle, slow, like Sophie had instructed, and saw Ethan waiting for her at the altar, she understood why people cried at weddings. It wasn't sadness. It was the overwhelming joy of being seen completely and loved anyway. They'd written their own vows. Ethan went first, his voice steady despite the emotion Lena could see in his eyes. Lena, when I met you, you were sitting alone in a room full of people who should have been celebrating you. And I watched you hold yourself together with a dignity and grace that told me everything I needed to know about your character. You'd been taught your entire life that you weren't worthy of love, but you loved yourself enough to keep going. You loved yourself enough to walk away from people who hurt you. You loved yourself enough to take a chance on me, on Sophie, on the possibility that family could be something different than what you'd known. He paused, taking her hand. I promise to spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to take that chance. I promise to choose you every day the way you've chosen us. I promise to love you not despite your past, but including all of it, the pain and the triumph and everything in between. You've already been Sophie's mother in every way that matters. Today just makes it official for everyone else to see what we've known for months. I love you, and I'm honored to build a life with you. Lena took a shaky breath, trying to keep her composure. Her own vows felt inadequate in the face of his eloquence, but she spoke them anyway, from the heart. Ethan, you taught me what it means to be chosen. 6 words, act like you're with me, changed my entire life. Because you didn't just offer me a seat at a different table. You offered me a place in your family, in your life, in your daughter's heart. You showed me that love isn't about perfection or performance. It's about showing up consistently and caring without conditions. She looked past him to where Sophie sat in the front row, watching with rapt attention. Sophie, you're the bravest, kindest, most wonderful person I know. You chose me before your dad did, and you never wavered in that choice. I promise to be the mother you deserve, the one who celebrates your purple dresses and your big feelings and your beautiful, enormous heart. I promise to show up for you the way no one showed up for me, and to break every toxic pattern I learned so you never have to unlearn them. She turned back to Ethan. I promise to love you both with everything I have, to build a family based on choice and trust, and the kind of radical acceptance I didn't know was possible until I found you. Thank you for refusing to look away. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. I choose you, today and every day after. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even the officiant had to pause to compose himself before continuing with the ceremony. When he finally pronounced them married and Ethan kissed her, Sophie cheered so loudly that several people laughed through their tears. The reception was in the same garden, casual and full of joy. They'd opted for a buffet-style dinner instead of formal plated service, wanting people to mingle and celebrate without the rigid structure of traditional wedding receptions. Sophie gave a speech that was mostly about how she'd always wanted a mom who liked dragons and was really good at helping with math homework, which made everyone laugh and cry simultaneously. Margaret spoke about how proud she was to officially welcome Lena into the family. Maya told embarrassing stories from their study sessions at college that had everyone roaring with laughter. Then Vanessa stood up, unplanned, her hands shaking as she asked if she could say something. Lena tensed, uncertain, but nodded. I don't deserve to speak at my sister's wedding, Vanessa began, her voice wavering. I spent 22 years making her feel like she didn't deserve love, didn't deserve a place in our family, didn't deserve to be celebrated. And I can't undo that damage. I can't give her back the childhood I helped steal. But I can stand here today and tell everyone what I should have said years ago. Lena is remarkable. She's brave and kind and resilient in ways I'll never be. She survived our family's cruelty and became someone who dedicates her life to helping other people survive their own trauma. She took the pain we inflicted and transformed it into compassion for others. Vanessa wiped at her eyes, mascara running. Ethan, Sophie, you're lucky to have her. And Lena, I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I need to say it publicly. I'm sorry for every time I participated in hurting you. I'm sorry I wasn't the sister you deserved. I'm trying to become that person now, and whether you ever fully forgive me or not, I need you to know that I see you. I finally see you. And you're beautiful. She sat down abruptly, clearly overwhelmed. Robert, who'd come as Vanessa's guest, their divorce not yet final but their friendship tentatively rebuilt, put his arm around her shoulders. Lena found herself standing, crossing to where Vanessa sat, pulling her sister into a hug that was awkward and genuine and spoke to the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds.
"Thank you," Lena whispered. "That took courage."
"Not as much courage as leaving took," Vanessa whispered back. "You've always been the brave one." The dancing started as the sun set, string lights illuminating the garden in soft gold. Ethan and Lena had their first dance to a song that Sophie had helped pick, something about finding home in unexpected places. Then Ethan danced with Sophie, who stood on his feet the way she had at the wedding where this had all begun. Then Lena danced with Sophie, the little girl wrapping her arms around Lena's waist and declaring loudly that this was the best day ever, even better than Disney World.
"Are you happy?" Sophie asked, looking up at Lena with those serious gray eyes that looked so much like her father's. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," Lena answered honestly. "Good. Because you deserve to be happy. Everyone deserves to be happy, but especially you because you're the best mom in the world." "I've only been officially your mom for about 3 hours." "Doesn't matter," Sophie said with 7-year-old certainty. "You were always my mom. Today we just had a party about it." As the evening wore on and guests began to drift away, Lena found herself standing with Ethan at the edge of the garden, watching the last few couples dance. Destiny approached, looking shy but pleased. "I'm going to head out," she said, "but thank you for inviting me. This was really beautiful. You look happy." "I am happy," Lena said, "and thank you for coming. It meant a lot to have you here." "You helped me believe I could have this someday," Destiny said quietly.
"A family that actually wants me, a life that doesn't hurt. Seeing you get your happy ending makes me think maybe I can get mine too."
"You absolutely can," Lena said firmly, "and you will. Keep doing the work. Keep believing you're worth fighting for, because you are." Destiny hugged her quickly, then disappeared into the parking lot with her mother. Maya left next, whispering that she'd call tomorrow to get all the details. Vanessa approached with Robert, asking if it would be okay to stay in touch more regularly, maybe video calls instead of just monthly coffee. Lena agreed tentatively, still guarded but willing to see where this rebuilt relationship could go. Finally, it was just their small core group, Ethan, Lena, Sophie, Margaret, and Thomas, sitting together at one of the reception tables as the venue staff began cleanup around them. Sophie was drooping with exhaustion, fighting sleep with the determination of a child who didn't want the magical day to end. "We should get her home," Ethan said softly. "It's past midnight. She's going to be impossible tomorrow." "I'm not tired," Sophie protested through a massive yawn. "I want to stay at the wedding forever." "The wedding is over, sweetheart," Lena said gently. "But the family is forever. We get to take that home with us." They drove back to the house. Their house. All 3 of them officially now, with Sophie asleep in the back seat before they'd even left the parking lot. Ethan carried her inside and up to her room while Lena stood in the quiet living room, still in her wedding dress, looking at the family photos that now included her. The engagement photos Margaret had insisted they take, the candids from various dinners and holidays, Sophie's artwork depicting their family in crayon and glitter. Ethan came back downstairs and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Miller?" "Strange," Lena admitted. "Good strange."
Like I'm waiting for something to go wrong because nothing this good has ever happened to me before. "Nothing is going to go wrong," Ethan said firmly. "This is your life now. Our life. And you don't have to keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Some stories actually do have happy endings."
"Do you think she would have approved?" Lena asked quietly, glancing at a photo of Sarah on the bookshelf. "Your wife. Do you think she would have been okay with this?" "I think she would have loved you," Ethan said without hesitation. Sarah always said that the best way to honor someone's memory is to keep living fully, to keep opening your heart even after loss. She would have wanted Sophie to have a mother who loves her. She would have wanted me to be happy, and she definitely would have appreciated the irony that I fell in love with someone at a wedding where I was only attending out of work obligation. Lena turned in his arms, facing him fully. "I love you."
"I don't say it enough, but I do. You saved my life that night, not in a metaphorical way. I genuinely don't know how much longer I could have survived in that family's toxicity. You saved your own life, Ethan corrected gently. You're the one who walked away. You're the one who chose healing over comfort. You're the one who did the hard work of building a new life. I just offered you a seat at a different table. You did everything else. They stood together in the quiet house, two people who'd found each other in a room full of deliberate blindness, who'd chosen to see clearly and love completely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the ordinary complications of blending a family, of raising a child, of building a marriage from the foundation of trauma and healing. But tonight, standing in the home they'd created together, Lena finally let herself believe in the permanence of this happiness. Upstairs, Sophie stirred in her sleep and called out, "Mom?" in that automatic way children do when they're half-conscious and seeking comfort. Lena's breath caught. It was the first time Sophie had called her that unconsciously, without thinking about it, just as a natural reflex. "I should," she started. "Go," Ethan said, smiling. "She's calling for you." Lena climbed the stairs and slipped into Sophie's room, where the little girl had tangled herself in her blankets and was making distressed sounds. She carefully untangled her, smoothed back her hair, whispered that everything was okay, that she was safe, that Mom was here. Sophie settled immediately, unconsciously reaching for Lena's hand and holding it even in sleep. Lena sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching this child who'd claimed her so completely, thinking about the strange and miraculous path that had led her here. A year ago, she'd been sitting behind a decorative palm tree, convinced she deserved invisibility. Now she was a wife, a mother, a woman who'd transformed her pain into purpose and her isolation into belonging. She thought about the letter she'd sent her parents, about the tentative door she'd left open for future reconciliation. She didn't know if they'd walk through it, didn't know if genuine change was possible for people so invested in their own righteousness. But she knew that she'd made her peace with whatever outcome emerged. She'd done the work of setting boundaries, of protecting herself while remaining open to possibility. The rest was up to them. She thought about Vanessa, about the long road of rebuilding trust, about the complicated truth that people could change if they truly committed to it. Their relationship would never be what it should have been. Those childhood years were gone forever, the damage permanent in many ways. But maybe they could build something new, something honest and boundaried and real. She thought about Destiny and the dozens of other kids she worked with, about the privilege and responsibility of showing them that survival was possible, that healing was real, that the trauma they'd endured didn't have to define their entire lives. She'd been given a second chance at family, at love, at belonging. The least she could do was help others find their own second chances. But mostly, she thought about Ethan and Sophie, about this small, perfect family they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. She thought about how 6 words spoken across a crowded ballroom had led to this moment, sitting in the dark beside a sleeping child who called her mom, married to a man who'd taught her what it meant to be truly chosen, living a life she'd never imagined she deserved. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness, not sure if she was talking to Ethan, to Sarah's memory, to the universe itself, or simply to her own stubborn refusal to accept that she was worth less than others. "Thank you for not looking away. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for proving that sometimes the broken things are exactly what need to be found." Sophie murmured something incoherent in her sleep, her small hand tightening around Lena's fingers. Downstairs, she could hear Ethan moving around, probably changing out of his suit, settling into the nighttime routine they'd established. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, the summer night peaceful. Lena finally stood, carefully extracting her hand from Sophie's grip, pulling the blanket up around the little girl's shoulders. She paused in the doorway, looking back at the child who'd become hers in every way that mattered, and felt her heart swell with a love so fierce it was almost painful. She found Ethan in their bedroom, she reminded herself, still getting used to the shared space, the mingled belongings, the intimacy of truly permanent commitment. He changed into comfortable clothes and was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at his phone. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking up as she entered. "Everything is perfect," Lena said, and meant it completely. "Sophie called me Mom, not consciously, just as a reflex when she was half asleep. But she called me Mom." Ethan's smile was brilliant. "That's huge. How do you feel?" "Terrified," Lena admitted, "and honored, and desperately hoping I don't mess this up." You won't mess it up, Ethan said confidently. You love her. That's the foundation everything else is built on. The rest is just details. They got ready for bed together with the comfortable synchronization of people who'd been sharing space long enough to know each other's rhythms. When they finally turned off the lights and settled under the covers, Ethan pulled Lena close. Happy wedding day, Mrs. Miller. Happy wedding day, Lena echoed. Then, because it needed to be said, because she'd spent too many years keeping important truths buried. I never thought I'd have this. A family who wanted me. A man who loved me. A child who called me mom. I spent my whole life believing I was fundamentally unlovable, and you proved that wasn't true. You and Sophie taught me that I was always worthy of love. I just needed to find people who could see that. We saw you, Ethan said simply. Sophie saw you first, actually. She's always been better at recognizing important people than I am. But once we saw you, there was never any question. You were ours. You just needed time to believe it. They fell asleep tangled together, secure in their love and their commitment and the life they'd built from a single brave choice made at a wedding that felt like a lifetime ago. And in the morning, when Sophie burst into their room demanding pancakes and asking if they could please go to the park because it's a special day and families should do special things on special days, they got up and made pancakes and went to the park. Because that's what families did. They showed up. They chose each other. They built lives from small moments of connection and care. And they proved again and again that the most powerful kind of love wasn't the one you were born into. It was the one you chose to create. Lena Parker Miller had been born into a family that saw her as a burden, but she'd chosen and been chosen by a family that saw her as a gift. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. Years later, when Sophie was in high school and working on a project about defining moments, she'd ask Lena to tell her the whole story, not just the cleaned-up version she'd heard as a child, but the real complicated truth of what happened at that wedding and everything that came after. And Lena would tell her, honestly and completely, about sitting alone behind a decorative palm, about the stranger who refused to look away, about the little girl who declared hiding people was mean, about the long journey from isolation to belonging. So Daddy saved you, Sophie would say, testing her understanding of the narrative. No, Lena would correct gently. I saved myself. But your daddy, and you, gave me a reason to believe I was worth saving. That's different. That's better. And Sophie, wise beyond her years in the way that children raised with emotional honesty often are, would nod and write in her paper that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept love when you've been taught you don't deserve it. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to look away when everyone else has chosen blindness. But that was still years in the future. For now, on this perfect summer morning, in this life she'd never imagined she could have, Lena Parker Miller made pancakes with her husband while their daughter set the table and chattered about dragons and school projects and all the ordinary, extraordinary things that made up a life lived in love rather than fear. And she was grateful for all of it, for the pain that had shaped her and the courage that had freed her and the family that had claimed her completely. She was finally, irrevocably, home.